long time. It's Lopez Radio episode 377 at Lopez Radio for all the social media. Of course, LopezRadio.com is where the show lives and wherever you get your podcast. Joining me tonight is one of my best good friends, one of my podcast brothers in arms, one of the best people I know. It's Shawn Arnold of the TMI podcast, TMIpod.com, at Shawn ATL on Twitter, and at Shawn Arnold on Instagram. What is up, dude?
377, you said?
377. Slowly creeping toward 400. Like I am dragging my legs behind me like Lieutenant Dan.
I'm trying to remember the first one. I think it was like...
Were you pre-100?
No, I think it was like 198.
Okay.
Maybe. But I mean, dude, 180 podcasts, that's a lot.
It's insane. It's a lot. And you know, what's really sad is, you know, I had a issue with the hosting because I wasn't doing it the right way. I was still doing it the really, really old school way. And GoDaddy was like, hey, go fuck yourself. And why don't you go somewhere else with your hosting? And when I did that, when you moved usually to a new podcast platform, it only pulls like your last 10 to 20 episodes. You know, they're not going to pull 315 episodes over. And I was like, all right, well, that's fine. And then when I went back to go get my descriptions from my old ones, because I was just going to start like a Lopez Radio archive, little podcast feed, I lost most of those descriptions. So if I want to know what that is going to be, I have to fire them up and listen to them. And you're talking about, like, especially in the beginning, through about episode 200, 250, I was like, it was easy hitting 3 hours. Oh, just so easy. And I'm like, I
feel like that's something we got to put Carrie and Suitcase on the case.
Yeah, maybe
just
have
like, hey man, every time you listen to one of these, I need you to write it up for me.
I feel like that would work out pretty well, honestly. But he'd probably make it really funny.
He's gonna listen to this and wonder why I just volunteered him to do a bunch of work.
You've been voluntold, Carrion. You've been voluntold. Get on it right now. I'll send you the files. I'll send you a thumb drive full of 300 and whatever it is, 20 fucking something. Yeah, so 377. Glad to have you back on. You actually helped me premiere the maiden voyage of a new venture I'm doing on YouTube called Offline with Lopez Radio, where basically the idea is to talk to creators and talk to artists about, you know, the things that motivate them, the things that slow them down, the things that make them scared to change, you know, stuff like that. Because I feel like you jump on YouTube and you hear a lot of people who are like, here's what you need to do. Here's what you got to do. Do this, try this. And it's just one person and they're not talking to anyone else, because no one person's journey is the same when you're doing music, when you're doing, any kind of creative endeavor, when you're starting a business, like in your case, like it's different every time. You got different factors to worry about. Like your factors are very different from me opening a fucking used sporting goods store, right? If I'm going to revive Play It Again Sports, I have a very different business plan than you.
Well, I mean, and here's the thing. There's certainly some science and some things that, you know, historically have been proven out to work, right? But I think the trick is, you know, number one, recognizing that there's really no silver bullet, right? There's not one magic thing that's going to make it all go. And then understanding that really that's just a starting point, right? So, you know, like everybody, like I recently was asked to judge a startup battle competition in Charleston. It was college senior business students at various colleges around the Southeast. They'd won their pitch competition where they were pitching business, basically like startup business ideas. And they won their college competition. And then all the colleges sent their winner to Charleston to compete against other schools for like one, you know, and it's sort of amazing. Like the two things is like, number one, it was like, well, how are you going to make money with this business idea? And so many of them are like, oh, advertising. And I'm like, okay, like I get it, but that's just sort of the popular thing now. It's like, oh, I'll just go get 1 million people and then I'll do advertising. And it's like, well, first of all, you're not going to get like 1 million people. Like, what are you going to do for the 2.5 years it takes you to get, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and there's no revenue. Like, how are you going to do that? Right. And to pay for all the shit you got to pay for. But also too, it's like, you're not Facebook, you're not, one of these places that, commands a zillion eyeballs. So like, you got to think of another way to make revenue. But then the other thing is too, like email marketing, right? Like everybody's just like, oh, I'm just going to do some email marketing. And
I'm going to do a newsletter.
Yeah. If that's your marketing strategy, you are dead, right? Like you can't, like, especially now because of all the proliferation of email and how much email people gets, like people still can do that. But my point is like, yes, is email marketing a part of a marketing plan? Of course it is, right? Like, of course it is. But how you leverage it, how you're going to get business from it, what you're going to do is going to be very dependent on the kind of business you have, the kind of audience you're after, all that sort of stuff. So that's what I mean. Like, so if somebody says to you, like, if you've got a new business, you need to do some email marketing, sure. Right. But is that it? Right. Or is that, it's like, no, like you've got to start doing it and figure out, okay, what specifically, how is it different from other things? What's the messaging like? That's all going to be unique to the DNA of what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got that starting point, but then I got to figure it out. Like in offline, we were talking about networking, right? About like building Twitch things. Like, that's say, if someone just says, yeah, network, that's how you build your stream. Well, sure, but that's not enough information. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, but how are you going to network and how are you going to, and then what's the next thing? Right.
Yeah.
Then like once you make those roads, then what's next? Do you have a strategy to try to play with people? Do you have a strategy to try to incorporate that into your content somehow? Do you have, some kind of cross-pollination plan, right? Where you're going to try to, just like showing up in somebody's chat and like saying hello to a few people, like that's not going to do shit.
Not anymore. No, that's all changed.
So, it's just about going, look for people that have done it before and can help you, but recognize that every single thing you pluck, you're going to have to then look at through the lens of what you're doing and how you're doing it and figuring out how it's going to work for you, because it doesn't work the same for everyone.
Right.
Right. So, and that's the step. I mean, people just think, again, and you got to do the work. The shit's not easy. Right. Like you can have the best, the joke always is you can have the cure for cancer. And if you don't market it right, nobody's going to buy it.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's all relative to what you're doing, and it's all, you brought up a great point in the offline episode we just did, that it's all in how much work you're going to put into it as well. Like, are you going to get in there and just kind of hope it just takes off? Like, all right, I'm going to let you go into the big ocean. Let's see where you go. Or are you going to actually get in and try to move the thing you're trying to move?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a good friend of the show, friend of our life, Curdy, and who we both hang out with a lot virtually, in voice chats and stuff. And she's always working on YouTube video. Like
Always.
she just always is. And I know that sometimes she gets frustrated, or not frustrated, but just grindy work. It's hard. It's hard work.
Yeah.
I mean, people think these content creators just record some shit and like, they think it's the good life of just like going on camera. And then when you're done, you just push 2 buttons and somehow this content just appears for everybody. It's not, it's like, they're probably spend 4 times the amount of time preparing and doing back end stuff than the actual creating of the stuff to make it to where it can go out. But it's like she works her ass off and does the work and it's paying, you know what I mean? It's a slow build. It takes time, but it's starting to pay dividends. And I know there's a lot of days when we're talking and she's working on stuff and it's frustrating because something technical is not working the way it's supposed to, or you're struggling with a graphic, or, you've got weird edits you got to do or whatever. But it's like, but at the end of the day, she does the work. And that's, and, she's seeing results. She's going to continue to see results if she keeps doing the work. But it's like, without the work, it would just be nothing. It would never really take off.
Right. And two, like, you have to also think about the fact that it's not just that. Like when you're live, when you're doing a live show, even like let's say you're outperforming music, you still got to deal with the crowd too. Like, so when someone like Herdy is streaming live, she's dealing with a chat. She's dealing with YouTube comments, like, and getting to know a lot of people who do things like Twitch or things like YouTube creation. You just have to be ready to deal with just shitty people too.
Sure.
Just shitty comments like here and the internet never sleeps, right? Like you might go to sleep, but someone, on the other side of the world's watching your video like, I'm going to tell them how they did this wrong or how they could have done this better. And like, you're kind of like, God damn it, man. Like, I know, like if I could do it better, I would, in most cases. But from that also comes some, I've seen where that happens to people and first they're mad about it. And then they think about it for a couple of days. They're like, yeah, I could probably do that a little better. So it's a give and take, to have that constant loop of feedback coming your way because you're putting yourself out there. You're putting yourself on camera. You're essentially just doing your own TV show in your living room or in your office and just being like, all right, world, come talk shit to me.
Well, and that's where, like, I mean, I try to be careful and sensitive too. I mean, I don't, well, let's create the caveat that there are just really terrible humans out there, and
Uh-huh.
I want to try to exclude them because some of them just, want to watch the world burn. You know what I mean? Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
their MO. So, but we were talking about music, and we mentioned in offline, I went to see Tears for Fears last night,
Yeah.
and it was unreal. Like they were so good, and like music, it's interesting, and I try to check myself because um, uh, things that people like to be hypercritical of, right? And when it's and usually entertainment content, right? So that would be Twitch, podcasting, movies, television, music,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
it- I try to be so careful because here's the thing. There's a big difference between saying I don't like something and saying that something is bad,
Hmm.
right? So I don't like it is, you know, that's fine, right? Like
Right.
everybody saying something sucks, right? Or is bad is not. And like with music, I'm probably overly empathetic to like musicians, and I think this expands to other content creators because I don't know if people appreciate the amount of work and heart and with music especially because normally it's something intensely personal.
Yeah.
So an example, the new Tears for Fears record. So they just released a new record. I think it's maybe the best record they've ever done, and that's considering I think from the Big Chair is one of the greatest, certainly one of the greatest records of the '80s, and one of my favorite records ever.
Yeah.
Um, it's called The Tipping Point. So the one of the singers, Roland's wife, died of alcoholism in 2017, and the main track called The Tipping Point is about her and her struggle with alcoholism and basically him watching her die, right? Like knowing she was dying. And the theme of it is she's even though she was alive, she was dead already, right? Like you could see like she was a ghost of herself, like you know. And so given all that, there will be people that'll be like, fuck that song. That song fucking sucks,
Right.
whatever. And it's like, okay, you don't like that song, but to him, right?
It's
Like
everything.
that's an unbelievably personal thing that it's like if you walked into the middle of the town square and just said, I want to tell you my story about my kid that got sick or my wife that died or of a relationship of mine that went horribly wrong, right? And I'm going to share it with you in this particular format with sound and rhyming and poetry, which is, basically what music is. And then somebody to just take a huge big shit on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and it's like, okay, but that's what I mean. It's like just trying to understand the line between I don't like it versus it's not bad. Now, I've heard some technically bad music, right? That's
Sure.
not, whatever, but those are just way different things. I think it's the thing, it's just saying it's not for me. Like, it's very popular for like people to take a shit on Nickelback, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's and I get it, man. Like, here's the thing though, like, those same thing, man. Those guys, they that shit means something to them and they've worked hard and I gotta respect it. Like you may not throw it in and whatever, but also too, there may be a lot of people that bitch, but like Chad Kroger ain't hurting for cash. You know what I mean?
No.
Like there's plenty of people that will buy, that eat that shit up. But
He's
it's
got a
like,
solid wallet.
yeah, I just get though, but and again, the larger thing is like there's definitely shit that I could say that's not for me,
Mm.
but I try real hard to not take a dump on the either the person's work ethic or the person's, because to them and probably a lot of other people that stuff is important, and and a lot of time and effort went into making it happen, and I just try to respect it. Like they feel like sometimes we're not respectful enough of other people and what they do and the stuff that they care about, because it's easy to take a dump on on something because it's just not your bag.
Yeah, and to your point about something like Nickelback, like, yeah, you can be like, yeah, this sucks, I hate it, whatever. But clearly, it means something to the artist, and clearly, it means something to a lot of fucking people that bought those albums. Like those albums, those their big 2 or 3 albums that came out were just enormous, and the songs still get play. Look at a band like Bush. 16 Stone still gets active airplay, and that shit came out when 96,
Yeah,
95,
a little before. Yeah, it's somewhere in there, mid '90s for sure.
and like it's just, you cannot deny the fact that there is something about it. When I worked at Project 961 in Atlanta, I didn't I didn't like Nickelback. I wasn't the biggest Nickelback fan, but I was absolutely aware that most of the people that listened to that station loved Nickelback. So, I mean, it's the nature of the beast, man. Like you may hate it. You may think it sucks, but in most cases when you're on the internet dropping comments like that, I don't see your fucking album. Like I don't hear your song on the radio. Like it's relative, and I think that's too something that you want to say is indicative of age, but I think, trolls and assholes get older too, and they're just miserable people sometimes, and they just want other people to be miserable with them. So it's just like the person that points out to their significant other, you could lose a little weight, or you could wear something different. It's very much, you're not really, you're poking fun, and you get to go off and do whatever the fuck you do in your trolley time, right? And you're leaving the other person with some hangups,
Yeah, I don't know, man. But just respect the hustle.
Yeah.
Like I like anybody that'll go get after it. There's plenty of stuff out there that I don't like, but I respect the hustle.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
and I don't want to stray too far from the Tears for Fears thing, because you had a couple of points you wanted to make about that show.
mhm.
I think you and the first time we met in person, actually, because we had podcasted a couple times together, and so like the first time we met in person was a Hall and Oates show where Tears for Fears was opening for Hall and Oates.
That's true. I still don't understand why Tears for Fears was opening for Hall and Oates, but
I guess it is what it is. I don't know. Maybe they were trying to warm back up or something from taking a break or something.
No idea.
But they were amazing. They sounded great. To me, they outdid Hall and Oates. I mean, and Hall and Oates was good, but they outdid them for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was an incredible show. What I was thinking about when we were chatting earlier, because we were talking about offline, we were not offline your show, but offline from all this stuff. That's going to be confusing. We were talking, not recording, and we were talking about this piece of equipment that we use, and they just released a new one, and how much technology's changed, and you're hosting for your podcast, and we talked about that at the beginning of this, but like. It's wild to me to even just when I was at the show last night, like I was pretty focused on just taking the show in because they're one of my favorite bands, but I can't help myself but just look around and see what's happening from a production standpoint, because that used to be the world I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And well, a great example, and their stage show is not anything crazy. They had like a ring shaped light rig. So it was like the whole back of the stage was a light scaffold that just went in a big circle.
Right.
And then there was a bigger circle behind it. And they had robos on them, robo lights.
I feel like they had that when we saw them too, like maybe a smaller version of
It
it.
was a square in the one we saw,
Okay.
and it didn't have the light rigs. It just had the big video board.
Okay.
But then this one is, and then in the middle of these ring lights, there was a big circular video board.
Okay.
But it was just watching where they had, and this is relevant, right? Because it's music, and I think it's germane to this conversation we're having. The videos that they ran for not all the songs, because for all the songs they had some kind of something going on the board, but for a handful of the songs, the video content, the visuals were actually tied to the music, which they're performing live. So there would be points where like the music would come down and there'd be a big cymbal crash that would come in, and like something would happen on the screen, and the timing, right, was and they're just running a video. And the way that works, for those that wonder how that happens, is that the video is run through a computer. The drummer in his ears has a click track, or it's a track that will just go
like a metronome
timing.
Yeah.
Right. So they'll know that, like, okay, we've synced up the timing to where we know how the song's structured, and we know when that big stop and cymbal crash comes in, and when these different parts of the song, if you stick to this tick, tick, tick in your ear, the video will match, even though everyone's playing the music live. And just from a choreography standpoint, it just was incredible to watch, because that requires quite a bit of production effort, obviously. But then everybody's got to execute, right?
Yeah.
There is no like meandering off. The guitar player can't just be like at a Prince show, for example, where he just be like, hey, I'm going to take another 8 bars here to just noodle around on the guitar or whatever. Like, you can't do that shit, right? Like, you got to stick to it, because otherwise it'll throw off the thing. But like, I just try to wonder like how much tech has changed. You know what I'm saying? And when I was doing it was pretty analog, to be honest. Like, you had soundboards and amps and stuff, but it's like now, drummers have, in these keyboard players, they've all got computers back there with them, and they can run, sample tracks over the top, if they got stuff they don't want to play, there's just like string parts, for example, or stuff that's just laying underneath. And I just wonder for guys like that, right? When they started, I mean, the Tears for Fears first album was 1983, right? That's when The Hurting came out.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy fuck, can you imagine like even just what doing your job's like for them now, like with all the tech and stuff? I mean, still at the root of it, you've got a guitar in your hand that's been around for however long of guitars have been around, 1,000 years or whatever it's been.
Yeah.
But then the stuff it's all connected to is so much more sophisticated.
Well, and how much is the skill? I'm sure there's a give and take, right? With the skill set that has had to change for like a roadie that's helping them set up, or a guitar tech or a drum tech. Like, yeah, maybe some of the more physical, like manual stuff is gone, because you've got, machines that'll help you calibrate that, computers that'll help you calibrate and tune things. But the take is now you have to learn to do that. Because before you're doing it by ear, or before you're doing it by, however your method was, right? So there's probably a crazy amount of, this is easier once you get to know how it works. Like, it's like implementing a new system in IT. Yes, this is going to make this thing easier, but I still have to learn it first, and then it's going to make it easier later.
Yeah, so light and sound techs for sure now are basically have to be support engineers.
Yeah.
Like, meaning computer, like help desk kind of skills, and drum techs, because usually if you have a keyboard player, they'll sometimes take that load, but for a lot of the things, the drummer too will have, like if you have backtracks and stuff, they'll run that from the kit, from behind. They'll usually have a little console off to their left where they've got all that stuff loaded up.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, those guys got to know how to deal with software and shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just like bringing a tuning key for a drum, like, and making sure the toms
right.
tuned up. Like, those days are, I mean, you still got to do that, but on top of it, now you've got on top of it. I mean, I stood behind the soundboard for a little while last night, and now even the boards are all digital. You know what I mean? Like, the boards themselves. Like, and what's funny is I think they leave analog stuff just so it still has tactile analog feel. But there's no analog. An analog board, like all the sliders were attached to a little lever that was actually physically hitting things, right? Now it's like the brakes on your car. Like, old school brakes, when you pushed them, it pushed a thing that levered and hit pads. The brakes were physical. Now, when you push your brake, it sends computer code to tell your brake pads to close down, right? There's no physical mechanism that works on a brake.
Yeah, the caliper's not manual anymore. Like, it's...
No. And, and that's what's kind of wild to just look at the tech. And I mean, no shit, man. It's like that shit looks like they're getting ready to launch a spaceship. You know what I mean? From back there, the sound with this and the light boards and stuff with all
Mhm.
I mean, they've got CAD design, where they figure out where all the lights are going to go. Cause they also, in conjunction with the video being synced up, so are the lights.
Yeah.
So all these light programs they have running, for the show it's just, God, man, it's just like the tech is just completely insane. And I just, it's got to be like, if I was going to list, like if I was going to interview those guys, that would be, I would really want to talk about how much technically different it is now versus when you started, like
Yeah.
just putting on a show.
Yeah, like what is different about your method now than that would be amazing to know. Like because I'm sure I don't know maybe when you're a band that was that big in the 80s, maybe not too much changes for you. I mean, I guess your conditions for hiring people maybe change, but I mean at some point that just falls to someone managing, right?
Yeah.
So but yeah, there's got to be some differences to be like, "Oh yeah, now I've got cuz I'm sure in 83 they didn't have as a sophisticated monitoring system as that you had before.
No, they had speakers in front of them.
Yeah, those speakers, like people don't really know that. They think that that's just something that someone comes and puts their foot up on while they're singing or playing
No, that's
guitar.
how you hear what's
Yeah.
happening.
That's the music playing back at their face so they can hear that everything's all right.
I'll tell you a hilarious story. We live in Atlanta, where you're listening to this from. Do you remember the old Cotton Club that was down
On
on Peachtree and 10th?
I
It was like right across the street from what's now is the Federal Reserve Bank, but it used to be that big green space where they had Music Midtown.
I don't think I ever went to that one. I think by the first time I went to the Cotton Club, they'd already stuck it under the tabernacle, right?
Yes. Okay. So there used to be a room that was
Mhm.
down at Peachtree and 10th, and it was the Cotton Club. It was about a 500 seater. It
Yeah.
was so you would sort of get emerging national acts there, right? You get some bigger local regional acts and emerging national. So an emerging national, for those of you that don't know the radio lingo, is usually like a new band that's maybe got one song on the radio, right? So
Right.
they're just getting started. They can't fill up the Roxy or somewhere, 2000. They can't fill up a 1,500, 2,000 seat room. So you put them in this 500 seat room. The Cotton Club in Atlanta, I remember the first time we played there, for whatever reason, the stage right monitor picked up 99X. And just in the middle of your show, you would just hear whatever was going on that whatever was happening on the radio. 99X was a modern rock radio station here in Atlanta. It would just be coming through. And when you would finish the song and go down, you would hear like Chumbawamba playing or something
Yeah.
or something like
Be sure to
just
tune in tomorrow for the Morning X. Blah 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 blah. You're
just
like, what?
randomly playing. And it was the most like Spinal Tap thing of all time, right? Like it just was like, what is going on now?
Why am I? Why am I hearing Tom Shane from the Shane Company right now? What's
But but that's the thing. It was just an analog speaker that just got you. If you're the guy standing stage right, those boxes were giving you what you wanted to hear, like what you needed to hear to do the show. Because people don't understand too, the speakers are usually out in front of you.
Yeah.
So in order for you to be able to, on stage to be able to hear what's happening, you have to have sound coming at you.
Yeah.
So there were speakers. Now everybody wears in-ears, right? Everybody wears these things and you're getting it in your ear. Back in the day, that's why all guys like my age and older, we're all deaf because you had the sound in the room, which was loud as shit. And then you had to make those things louder than shit because if you were going to hear yourself, you know what I mean? And you're standing 5 feet from a guitar amp and a drummer that's playing, hitting the drums as hard as he possibly can. Like, and it was just like this crazy cacophony of sound going on stage. And the only way you could hear anything is going through this little box. They called them wedges, right? Monitor wedges. So whatever your wedge was, like that's where before the show, you'd tell the sound guy, I want to hear the snare drum in this. I want to hear my guitar. I want to hear my voice. I want to hear the other singer's voice. And that's it. I don't want to hear anything else. I want to hear the bass player. I don't want to hear the other guitar player. I don't want to hear,
That's insane.
And it's just like, and again, that's all changed. But I tell you, when we were doing it, we switched over to in-ears. Those kind of started happening right about the time we were doing it. And you know what's funny? What we had to do is, and this is just, I guess, what people get used to. And we've talked about this, talking about the difference between using closed back or over ear headphones versus in-ears. We got some in-ears And we absolutely hated it because it made you feel really isolated. It sounded amazing. Like you could hear more than you could ever hear before because you're just getting it right in your ear. We started at our shows putting two SM57s on the edges of the stage and pointing them at the crowd
Oh, so you get the crowd noise?
and making them put the crowd in our ears because you felt like you were playing in like your garage. Like there was no, not feedback, like guitar feedback. There was no feedback from the room. You didn't get any of the room sound.
Oh, that
And
had to
it
be
was this
weird.
very antiseptic, sort of like sterile. And when you're like our kind of band, we're a live band, like we're a jump around and everybody have a good time kind of, band, right? Like it was a rock band. And it was like that. We did one show and we're like, we gotta do something. This sounds wrong. It feels like we're not getting anything back from the crowd. And
Yeah, that's
it,
got to be
it,
odd.
it makes it hard to perform. You know what I mean? Like you can see it. And that's the other thing too, is you see it. It's like when your monitor sound goes off.
Mhm.
It's like you can see everything, but you can't hear shit. You know what I mean? So it was just really strange.
It is odd to me to look at or talk to people who stream or the podcast, and we're talking about sound, or maybe they're upgrading their equipment or getting new equipment and stuff like that. And when I ask them if they like, I'm always interested to know if people monitor themselves in their headphones, because it's a very radio thing. You go through like broadcast school, or you get trained at a radio station. Like, all right, everything that comes through this board is going into your headphones. Your voice, the song, everything, the phone, whatever. And so I'm just used to it. I feel weird without it. But there are people who literally don't know how to deal with their own voice coming into their ears. And it's so weird to me. I'm like, I feel like something is wrong. If I'm not hearing myself in my ears, I feel like something is really, really wrong. So it's always interesting to see different takes, because, clearly radio is not what it used to be. And there's a lot of people who are essentially doing radio on the internet. They may be playing a game. Maybe they're just sitting around literally having a talk show, just chatting on Twitch or something like that. And it's no different. The chat is are your callers, and it's not, there's nothing different other than that. And it's visual, and I'm just kind of like, so no one gets that traditional training of like, hey, you want to make sure everything sounds good. And you can usually tell when someone is new or hasn't listened back to their own stuff to be like, oh, does this sound good? Is this a good thing to even listen to? Because you could be like, hey man, you're blowing out your microphone. You sound like shit. And they'll be like, well, it sounds fine to me. I was like, you're not listening to yourself, bro.
Yeah, that to me is from a measure of control. Like I've heard people say that too, and I just don't understand. Well, how do you know if you don't sound right? You know what I mean? Like that's literally well, there's two main components to your product, right? What you're putting out visually and what you're putting out sonically.
Yeah.
Like, and if you can't hear, I don't get it. Like, and again, maybe I'm just a dinosaur, but it's just like, to me, I was just like, I would want to know if something sounded funky. And the only way I can know is if I can hear it.
Well, and how many times have you been? Because you and I have watched a lot of Twitch. I mean, we usually watch it while we're working, and you don't see it as much on YouTube because that's pre-recorded stuff, and it's usually edited and watched a million times before it's posted. But how many times have you been in a stream and someone's like, "All right, BRB, I'm gonna go use the bathroom," and they come back, and then they spend like 30 minutes playing a round of a game, and they don't even realize their mic's muted. They're talking, but all you hear is the gameplay. Or maybe you don't even hear that. Like maybe they muted the whole thing, and you see silence. And it just, that is my nightmare, right? Like that is my nightmare, looking over and being like, oh, I didn't hit record or something like that. Like that is also my nightmare, right?
Or the alternative, which I've seen so many times, is people say, I'll be right back. And again, because they're not doing any monitoring in their ears, they come back to their desk and they think their mic's muted. And they have like a 5-minute conversation with their roommate or their wife or girlfriend or husband or boyfriend or something, or they take a phone call.
Yeah.
And they just got a hot mic, but they don't realize it because they can't, like if they had their ears on, they would be like, oh shit, I'm hot.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is all getting pushed out there.
That's why the on-air light exists. Like,
Yeah.
if the mic is on, that light is on in the studio. I wish I had a way to tie that into the Roadcaster somehow. I would love it. I would love it if the mic is on. Like, let me know, right? But yeah, I mean, and then you get people who get cheeky. Like, honestly, I'm a big fan of making people think I forgot shit. Like, I'll leave my mic on and I'll just have a fake conversation sometimes. And or my personal favorite is when you sign off and then you're like, oh, these fucking assholes, you know, like you're like these assholes, blah blah blah. Just talk shit like openly and just make it funny. But it's always fun because the people who aren't in on the joke are just like, oh, he left his mic on, you know, shit like that.
Well, bro, that was your old sign off from Twitch. Let's get the fuck out of here. The dude that was like the dude.
Oh, the news anchor, yeah.
Broadcast, yeah. That thought he was done. He was like, clearly had not had a good day.
Yeah, let's get the fuck out of here.
The Office.
Fucking love it, man.
Or what was the Bill O'Reilly one? We'll fucking do it live.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Fucking thing sucks. I love that shit so much. That's tomorrow, and this is today. I can't read that. It's so good.
Everybody that's been in, I mean, Holly's got hot mic stories. That's the thing, man, is everybody that's ever done this for a minute has got a hot mic story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, like it is gonna happen. It's like and no matter how many you tell people, it's like just assume any mic you ever have in front of your face is hot. Just assume it's hot. Right?
Yep.
Like, and it's like you can tell people that all day long and somebody's gonna screw up. And
I can't tell you the amount of like I'd be sitting in a studio and like I'm talking to someone and I've got my hand on the mic pot, like just kind of like in an OCD type of way. Just I have it pressing into my thumb, like so I could be like, yep, it's down while I'm talking to this person. Like it's just something that never leaves your mind. Kind of like when you got your headphones on and you're working on something in between breaks and you just hear silence. It's the loudest thing you've ever heard in your life. You're like, why isn't anything playing? What's happening right now? Like you start like hitting everything on the console. Like what the fuck is going on right now?
Yeah. Quiet is the enemy. I mean, that's because dead air would get your ass fired.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, back in the old radio days, like, especially when everything was manual, right? Like,
because you've thrown off the clock. You fucked the clock up because we have to
clock's wrecked.
The clock is wrecked. You ruined the clock. I bought a house. That was our favorite thing. When I was on the Giant Show in 961, like anytime we did something stupid or something that was like, okay, we're gonna get in trouble for that. Like we'd literally just look at each other and be like, I bought a house. Like, like it was so fucking funny, man. But my first time on the air in Atlanta, I think I've probably told this story before. My very first time on the air in Atlanta, I had to fill in for the night guy on 961, and I was like, this is what I've been working toward for fucking, you know, ever. I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to be on the air. Like I was pumped because I did all the things that like I probably did like unnecessarily amounts of things to just have exposure. It worked. I got a job there, but like literally I did an internship and I'm in the middle of the internship and the PD's like, why are you doing an internship? I'm just gonna call you about an interview. So you could come and be on air here. And I was like, I don't know, like blah, blah, blah. And so they basically just kind of paper whipped my internship, said, oh yeah, he's done all the hours. And they put me on part-time. So first time I jump in and I fill in for the night guy and I'm getting ready. And, you know, I kind of did like sit down with the PD. He's like, yeah, just go in there and do your thing. You know what you're doing. And, you know, you got your liners and, you know, things you need to hit and stuff like that. So very first thing, I cracked the mic, very first break. And I'm like, I said, World Class Rock Bulldog 1037. And then it was just like, I couldn't talk after that because I knew I was like, and then it was like maybe 2 seconds and I was just like, song. I just hit the song, you know, just like, all right, I'm just going to press that. And I sat there and I just stared at the floor and I was like, what did I just do? And I'm like freaked out. And turns out nobody even heard it. Like nobody that would have been mad about it. But I even told the PD about it. It's like, oh yeah, that'll happen to you. Don't worry about it. He's like, we got people in this building that work at 2 or 3 different stations, like, and they do it all the time. Don't worry about it. I was like,
Yeah, it's so funny. Like Holly like tells me like she cold sweats. So CNN has my wife has an offshoot called News Source.
mhm,
And News Source is a product that CNN sells. So like if you're like, let's say you're the ABC affiliate in Houston, Texas, right? You can pay a fee to CNN and like let's say that you want to cover like the Boston bombing, you know what I mean?
sure,
Or like something in the world goes on. CNN will send people to that thing. And if the Houston station pays for that, small stations, they may not be able to afford to put people or have the personnel to put somebody on a plane and send them to Boston. So what they'll do is they'll say, hey, we want to use our news source thing or whatever. And they're like, okay, we can get you a person in this time slot to do a hit. Right. And and they throw it to a CNN person and they're unbranded, they don't wear anything. And they just represent themselves as if they're part of that news station's team.
yeah,
Right. And they're doing reporting. Like if Holly went for news source, I mean, you're talking to police, you're getting information and then you give it. And then the anchors can ask you questions like, what are you hearing about this? What are you hearing about that? And they report and then they cut away. And, then the local station goes on about their broadcast. And then Holly or whoever was doing the news source hit would then go, okay, now you're going to do the hit for the next person on the list.
and
right?
doesn't that work both ways? Sometimes they like some like CNN couldn't get someone out there, but so they'll you hear people being like, oh, national might pick this up.
Yeah. So if they have audio, if they have video or something they want, they would go, hey, can we get that? Like if you have video or something, they'll buy it or they'll license it. Yeah. So they can run it. Or, sometimes if they want to use, not so much using a reporter because that'll just, there's some danger that's protecting the brand a little. So I hate to say it works in different directions, but if they're reaching out to CNN, they know the person that's in the field doing that is going to be someone that's like a super pro because you don't get to CNN to be a rookie, but you
Right.
could have someone very green working at
But
a
like
local.
CBS and ABC, they'll reach out to their local affiliates because they're ABC, CBS people.
Yes, 100%. Even though those are technically like almost franchises, they're
Sure.
not necessarily owned by CBS. They're
Right.
not called O&Os, right? Owned and operated.
Mhm.
But yes, it works that direction. And a lot of times for big news stories, there's a lot of intercooperation anyway. Like even if CBS gets something that ABC doesn't have, they'll make it available to ABC, right? Like, or that sort of stuff. I mean, it's somewhat competitive, but it depends on the nature of the news story. But anyways, Holly just always tells the thing because basically what happens is there's someone. So Holly's in Boston, a news station that's reaching out to her is in Houston, and then the master control's in Atlanta, right? Where somebody's in, a big room like you see in the movies, right? Where there's monitors everywhere and all the sound stuff, and
Right.
they're sort of directing traffic. Well, Holly's wearing an IFB, right? An in-ear, an earpiece where she's getting talked to by control, and they'll be like, okay, in 30 seconds, you've got Bob and Sally from Albuquerque. And then at WR, whatever it is, or in that case, it'd be case, KR2, KRZP,
Mhm.
in Albuquerque. And then you go, and then they'd finish that and they'd be like, okay, in 20 seconds, you've got Frank and Janine from WKZP in Baltimore, Maryland, go. And Holly is like, so, because then she's like, she'll do it. And because you may do 30 of those
Mhm.
in an hour and 50, an hour and a half, like because all these affiliates are wanting to get their hits. And it's like, you're just struggling because she's like, and they've said it right in my ear and 10 seconds later, it's gone. I've done so many. I don't know the names of I don't know who's about to say something to me.
Right.
And where she's like called a Frank Tom or, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, it's got to be
whatever,
stressful.
or like the call letters or whatever. But yeah, like, but she's got those stories where too, it's just like all of a sudden you're just sitting there going,
I swear I'm a professional. I swear I'm a professional.
and it's like, I'm fine talking about what I got to talk about. But if I got to, cause it's always like, back to you, Bob. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Or like whatever at the thing. And it's just like, and it's like, then you just learn not to try. She's like, if I can't remember, I'd just be like, back to you guys, or whatever. And
Right.
it's just like, cause there's so many times I've said the wrong name and, they're probably just like, who's Bob? Like,
Right. You try to figure out like who the hell is that, but then you just figure out little things that you know will work, right? You're just kind of like, all right, well, if I get in a bind and I don't remember what this is, like, yeah, be sure to go to this website, or be sure to check out the website or give us a call, like something like that. Just you figure out ways out of it, and you can always tell a broadcaster that has been like whether they're radio or TV. Or I mean, even in some cases, with stuff like Twitch now, because there's people who have been now doing that for many years. You can just tell that they know how to get out of a situation without making it a situation. They know they got the gift of gab. I worked with a guy named Chris, Chris at my old station, my original station, Bulldog, and you could talk to that. You couldn't shake the guy on the air. Like he would roll with anything, and you just couldn't. You couldn't shake him, and you go to like a live event with him, like when I was still like a remote tech, setting up the table and setting up the antenna so it could talk, so it could transmit to the station and all that stuff, and anything could come up, and he would just be like, he would roll with it. He'd make it part of his liners that he had to hit, and I'm just kind of like, how do you do that? He's like, I've just been doing it forever. And like he's just, after a while, you just realize, you just see these little gaps that you can squeeze through, and that's it.
it's the same thing with music. Like I was talking to somebody about the other day about dealing with hecklers.
Mm.
Because I developed a pretty serious arsenal of defensive techniques. You know what I mean? Because I played a lot of bar gigs, man, and it's just, this was before the internet really, like, and internet trolls, but those people existed IRL long before the internet, was around, and they're just there trying to get, I don't know what they're trying to do, to make everybody's life miserable. I don't know, get a rise out of their friends, but you're somehow going to end up being the one that becomes the focus of their thing. And, I had younger guys that would just be like, you just wreck somebody that's heckling you or whatever. And they're like, how you're so fast. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not though. I've got in my mind, I've got about 8 things that I can just use, and I just mix them up.
Yeah.
And it's like, because I've been doing this for so long that, it's like,
just got the Rolodex of insult.
Yeah. Or just how you want to try to, and depending on how you want to shut somebody down, right? Do you want to do it soft? Do you want to do it hard? Do you want to, do you want to embarrass them? Do you want them to just go away? That sort of stuff. But it's like,
You hear comedians talk about that a lot too. Like, and like, especially seasoned comedians, they realize when they do need to do that, right? Like when they do need to be hard on someone, or when they just need to kind of let it roll, or let someone at the venue take care of it, because, depending on what point in their set they're at, where the crowd is feeling, you can lose a crowd by going too hard on somebody. Sure. You can absolutely lose a crowd, and then now you got to do the work to get them back, because all of a sudden, like they don't know that someone's talking shit to you in the front row, because this person's in the back row of the upper level, right? So you're kind of like, wow, that guy he just went after that guy, and so it's just knowing when to use that stuff, and that comes with time too. It's funny.
It also just shows, it just reinforces too, like how infinitely stupid people are.
Oh yeah.
Like as a whole, like heckling a comedian. I mean, that's like the equivalent of like picking a bar fight with Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Like you really want to verbally spar with someone that not only is funny for a living, but stands up in front of a bunch of people every night, and mind you, whose voice is amplified by a factor, right? Like this many people, a handful of people around you are going to be able to hear you, and the entire room is going to be able to hear whatever that guy says.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, how dumb do you have to be to go after a comedian? Like they're going to just tear you apart. Like I don't understand why people think that ever ends well, because it won't.
Yeah, it never does. And I've never understood, honestly, the urge to yell out during a show. Like I've gone to so many I've probably been to as many comedy shows as I've been to concerts, and inevitably someone's going to yell out something stupid, and most really good comedians are going to roll with it, ignore it, or have a good way of shutting it down. And but I just never know. I've never had the urge to just holler out at a show and say something dumb. Unless like the comedian, unless you're sitting in the front row and he looks at you and asks you a question or something like
Right.
that. That's different. I've been in that situation too. So it's like, I don't know. I think it's like you said, it's just assholes have existed, in, since well before the internet.
Bro, even last night there was a dude at Tears for Fears that was like in front of, we were in the 8th row. We had pretty good seats, but
Sure.
he was kind of in front and to the left of me. And at the beginning of the night, the guy starts yelling out songs he wants them to play.
It's not
And I'm like, bro, like, are you under the impression that they didn't come here with a plan?
No, man. The cymbal crash with the video monitor is all talent. It's all fucking just pure luck.
Like, do you not think they have an order of like, is that how you think this works? Like, they're just going to go, oh, the fat fuck in the front row that's had too many 40-ounce beers for $18 a piece or whatever they are. It wants to hear a song. So let's just reorganize everything we've done tonight so we can play whatever it is for this guy.
How are you at a Tears for Fears show and not know what a fucking set list is? Like,
how can you be at any show? Like, you know what I mean? It's one thing if like you're again at what I used to do, right? You're at a bar gig and a guy's in there playing covers and you're just like, yes, that is the appropriate environment to go, hey, can you play, fucking Brown Eyed Girl? No, I can't, but thanks for asking.
right.
Or, think of a better song and I'll be happy to fulfill your request.
Now, and
my personal favorite was, sure, write the name of that song down on 100 and put it in my tip jar, and I'll be happy to play it for you. Anyways, what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, well, speaking of the Tears for Fears thing, I've thought of something I wanted to ask you. You mentioned last night that it was an amphitheater show. Are you more of an amphitheater person or an indoor concert person? Or
amphitheater.
You like amphitheater more?
Oh, give me outside anytime. It sounds better.
Oh, really? Okay. I've always preferred indoors. I don't know why, but I've always preferred indoor concert. But I'm more visual, so I don't know if that's part of it, right? Especially in the summer when it gets dark so late. Sometimes you're watching a show and you're like, this doesn't look right. Like you go to a music festival and you see like, like a metal band play and it's like sunlight outside. And you're like, this looks weird.
Yeah, purely sonically, right? Like from a sound engineering standpoint, a sound guy not having to deal with the bouncing around of sound is going to make it sound better.
Yeah.
Right. Because the sound goes out into the universe and just disappear, right? Like it goes out into the sky. Whereas in any room, now some rooms are built better than others, and that's a hurdle that you can climb. Not to say that I've never heard a good sounding indoor show. Absolutely. But I know that whoever's working that show is going to have an infinitely easier time to dial that shit in, because that stuff, amphitheaters are actually built to direct sound out and away from the stage.
Yeah.
And in a concert hall, it hits the back wall and comes back at you. And it hits the side walls and comes around. Amphitheaters don't have that. So the sound just, when it hits your ears, you're hearing it the first time, it's EQ'd and set up to best to where it hits you on the way out, and then it passes you, and then it's gone forever. So that for me, now the concert experience that's not necessarily true. Depends on the amphitheater, depends on where I'm sitting. But as far as just purely how it sounds, like give me outside every single time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess it's just more a visual thing for me. Like I don't know. Like I like being indoors, like a medium to large size venue. If I'm preferring it, it's going to be like the Tabernacle, right? I love the Tabernacle in Atlanta. But I've seen a lot of shows there too. So
here's the caveat. That kind of room, it's better. And here's why. The amount of power it takes to fill that room with sound is a lot easier to manage. It's like riding a small horse.
Yeah.
But like if you're in Phillips or in the Georgia Dome or in Mercedes-Benz or something like that, you have to literally just decibel, like just to get people in the back and to throw the sound that far, you have to create so much volume, right, that it becomes a problem. I don't know if you recall, but like I went to U2 at the Georgia Dome, which was the first concert they ever did in the Georgia Dome.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
just because of how it sounded, because it's that weird fabric they had on the roof, like all the metal scaffolding that was exposed. It just, there was a lot of things working against them in that scenario. And those guys, I mean, it's you too, right? It's not like there was anybody that didn't know what they were doing, right? And it's not that you two was playing poorly. It just sounded absolutely atrocious.
That sucks
And
because it was bouncing from every direction.
yeah, and it was just, and because of the round nature of it, you also couldn't isolate, because with at least with right angles and flat surfaces, you can kind of figure it out. But with round, it's like, and all these weird, it's just everything, it's like a bullet storm, right?
Mhm.
Like in a video game, right? Like it's just everything's coming in all weird, and then things bounce off each other. I mean, we talk about like reverb, we've talked about the concept of why you do that. I mean, that's why in good rooms you get some good natural reverb.
Yeah.
But if you don't do it right, so those medium rooms, the tab sounds amazing, right? Like that's a killer place to see a show. But it's kind of short and tall because you have the balconies. That's also easier because, again, in order to get sound to the back of the room, you do not have to crank those amps, right? It does not have to be super loud in there. I would even argue sometimes in the Tabernacle, I can physically hear the guitar amplifiers on stage, right? As much as I can hear it in the thing. If you're on the lawn at Chastain or whatever, you're not hearing somebody's Marshall stack that's sitting on the stage. You're only going to get what comes out of those big fuck off, racks and racks of speakers that are up on the thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so medium to small rooms are fine. I love seeing shows in those, but that sound is way more controllable. The bigger the room gets, the bigger and enclosed. Because think about how an airplane hangar sounds. Have you ever walked into like a big warehouse and you
Yeah.
talk, the difference between think about that. Just your voice in a warehouse. Like
Yeah.
when you were at Best Buy. If you walked into the Best Buy warehouse, think about how you just sounded speaking.
Way different.
That's what you're dealing with speakers the size of your two of you, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's awful. So the bigger the enclosed space, the worse it's going to sound.
Didn't they have an issue with Mercedes-Benz Stadium at the start? Like Garth Brooks was like the first big concert there, and people were just like, it sounded terrible
because of all the glass. So a glass, they have that whole back wall of the thing is, it's glass, which is great for being able to see the city and all that stuff. But glass is your enemy, right? Like with sound, because glass vibrates. Everybody's seen the thing where crystal, now that's a specific kind of, where you rub your finger on the glass and it hums.
Yeah.
When glass vibrates, it doesn't move like wood or metal, right? Like it moves different. And if you've got glass around, you're guaranteed to have a nightmare of a time. I used to always love when we would pull into some new joint we were going to play at or some bar, and they set you up to where either the wall you were facing was all glass or the wall right behind the stage was all glass. Now, if the wall right behind the stage was all glass, that was okay for the audience. But, we talked about those monitor wedges. That means that everything I'm hearing is going to hit that glass and just hum in my ears all fucking night long.
Yeah.
Because of the way the glass is. But yeah, all that glass at Mercedes-Benz just is a challenge.
Have you been to and I think I know how they fix this. I meant to look last time I was there. I've been to a couple shows since they moved the Masquerade. And now it's where Underground Atlanta was. It's in those little strip mall areas.
I haven't been there.
And so they've still got Heaven, Hell, Purgatory, and it's literally strip mall. So like the outside is glass. The outside is all glass window. But I seem to remember you go in and only like a few panes of the glass to each side of the door maybe are still there. And I think they just covered up the rest of the glass, if I remember correctly. But I remember looking at it from the outside and being like, that's got to be a nightmare inside. Now, I have been to one show where I don't know who fucked up, but man, you could not hear the singer at all. You could hear the band and they sounded great. You couldn't hear the singer. And I was like right up in the front because it wasn't a seated show. It was just a standing room show. And I could hear the singer, but not him through his microphone, if that makes sense. Like, kind of like you said, you could hear the Marshall stacks. I could hear him singing. He could have just put the mic down and I would have heard him the same, And I don't know how they fucked that up because the opening band sounded fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's different sound guides, first of all, you know what I mean? And who knows? But like another tips and tricks, if you like concerts, sound is directional, right? You got to think about speakers like faucets, or like fire hoses, right?
Yeah.
Spraying out sound waves. The soundboard, which if you notice, the guys that it's always generally right somewhere in the middle of the room,
Hmm.
the guys that are mixing sound. Um, the speakers, even in a room, are generally set up to sort of focal point on that space. The reason is because you want the sound guy to mix to what he can hear, right?
Yeah.
So if you're, so I know people always clamor to be close to the stage. It does not sound good up there generally,
Yeah.
right? Because you're actually in front of the cone, right? If you think about it coming together in the middle, if you just want to hear a band. So my always thing is like, if you're going to a band where you're going to listen to them, right? Like they're unbelievably sonically good and you can buy tickets, look on the seating chart, figure out where the well is, right? For the sound guy and find some seats around there because that guy is mixing the sound to sound as good as he can get it to his ears. And that's where he's sitting. And it's going to sound different in the wings. It's going to sound different up front. It's going to sound different in the back. So, but it's just to your point, like, and again, that's just can do room setup, right? Because sometimes you see where like the speakers hang out over. So if you're right up on the stage, the speakers are actually out in front of out, like you're in front of the speakers are behind you,
Yeah.
right? Even though you're in the audience, and there's just no way for you to hear that. All you're getting is like some peripheral bleed from those speakers, and you're hearing probably what's going on stage.
Hmm.
And it makes it really hard to hear vocals in that scenario because like for example, you're always going to hear the drums when you're standing up front. Like, great. You know why? Because you're literally hearing the drum sounds.
Yeah. You're right in front of the drum set.
You're hearing a crack of a snare because you're hearing when that guy hits that snare, right? And in the back of the room, you're hearing the snare through the speakers, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, all that stuff is very, but I mean, live sound in big, I mean, that those guys that are good are worth their weight in gold because it is not always easy, right? Like it is not always depending on the room. And it's just,
Well, and I got to imagine too, like if you're, because you know, your sound guy travels with you, does he not? Or do they work for the
yes. No. Well, for that kind of act, 100%. I mean, yeah, if you're a big touring act, your whole crew, everybody is your people. And a lot of times it's your boards, believe it or not. Like those big boards, they'll bring their own board. Like, you know, the Tears for Fears, and I don't know this, but for a fact, but there's a semi truck that has that light rigs, the scaffolding, the guitar, everybody's equipment, the sound stuff. So one of my buddies, Alan Smith, is actually the production manager for Ameris, where we went last night.
Mm-hmm.
And the trucks got there at 11 o'clock yesterday morning, and he's there to meet them. And their crew brings in everything, builds the stage, brings in their soundboards, wires everything up. You know, they'll have some basic stuff. You know, there'll be a trunk from like the sound. You know, there'll be a trunk that goes from the sound thing in. But like the big Phillips and arena shows, there's literally nothing. The band will bring everything. So they're basically building the concert from a sound engineering standpoint from scratch every day.
Now, would places like a big arena, like say Phillips or Mercedes Benz, would they have someone there to be like, hey, they're the guy to talk to, be like, hey, you're gonna have a bad bounce here, you're gonna have a bad bounce there, you need to make sure to correct for this glass over here, or no?
Maybe. I mean, a good production manager, venue production manager should know that stuff, right? Like, and to be honest with you, like at those levels, the sound guys, my bet would be the sound guy from Tears talk to some of his buddies that have worked that room before that do what he does and that does what he does and will get some of that intel.
Okay.
Like, you know, he'll talk to another sound guy for another band that's been through there and they'll say, you need to look out for this. You need to, you know what I mean? Like this will be a thing, you know, cause it's just like any gig, you know, those are your peers and everybody knows everybody, you know? So, you'll get some of that, but yeah, a good production manager should be able to help with some of that. You know what I mean? Like that a venue will provide. Now, smaller venues, a lot of times will provide a sound because again, sometimes small to mid bands may not travel with the sound guy. So you may have a guy that's attached to the venue, or sometimes people will hire a local guy. You know, like when we first started, we didn't travel with an engineer, right? Like we just you know, in our contract, the venue would have to have an engineer. So they had a guy that mixes the room, right? And he knows the room. Now that's a total fucking dice roll. You know what I mean? Because that guy could be an alcohol. I mean, believe me,
You had everything, I'm sure.
I mean, I won't say where, but like that I rolled in one time where we were getting ready to play a show and it was like a radio showcase. Like we had a bunch of like radio people there and we loaded in and I walked backstage and the sound guy was back there just hammering lines of Coke. like in the back room, like
Jesus.
before the gig. And I'm like,
Are you the sound guy?
what are you doing?
Carl?
You know what I mean?
What are you
Like,
doing, buddy?
um, but that's what I mean. Like you just never, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, think about it. It's a guy that's doing mixing live sound in some bar, you know, he works every night, you know, in some music room that seats 400 people. You know what I mean? Like he's working 3 or 4 nights a week. There's no telling what kind of, but yeah, like sometimes that's how it was. I mean, it leads to some of the stories, but most of the big acts are going to always have all their own everything. Like they're not going to think about it from a business standpoint. They're not leaving anything to anybody. Like that kind of production, you're not putting anything in anybody's hands you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I could see that. Like, it's at that point, it's your baby, and you got people paying a lot of fucking money to come see you. Like, you've got,
Yeah, I spent $225 a ticket to go to that show.
Shwee.
I mean, we sat again. I was 7 rows from the front. You know what
Sure.
I mean? Down in the thing, I was in a, you know, we were in really good seats. But I mean, Ameris seats 12,000 people, and it was sold out. You figure average seats what $100 in that thing.
Mm.
I mean, 1.2 million, right? Like, God, that's not a, you know. But that's what I mean. Like,
And that's before the Ticketmaster fees.
Yeah, I mean, but you're not, you know, you're not skimping on, you know, and really big acts. So here's what's crazy. Like Metallica is famous for this. I don't even know if they pioneered it, but you know, they got to a point where they were playing these arena shows. Their whole stage setup, sound, gear, stage stuff, lighting, all that stuff. They had 2 full sets because it took 2 days to get it built, and they would leapfrog each other. So I want to say they had 12 semis, and they would go to one place and set up, and the other one would go to the next spot. And while they were doing one city, the second set of shit would get built in that city. Then the band and the people would fly or bus or do whatever they got to do to that one. And then they would break down the one they just built, leapfrog that show, and go to the next show. God. So they paid to have 2. And they famously had, like, Metallica has an accounting semi. So they would have like a truck that had their office. Like they had one semi where the back of it was built out into offices. So they could pull in and do merch, dealing with the venue. The managers had a place where they could go in and sit down and do work if they needed to. They could have meetings. They could do all that shit because it is a company, right? It is a multi-million-dollar company.
Just insane.
Right? That was going, and think about like at a Metallica show, you would have, you know, famously Dave Matthews would do, his average was $1 to $1.5 million in merch at every show. Right. So just think about dealing with the t-shirt and hat vendors at the end of every night and making sure you get all your money and get the fuck out of there.
And get all the extra stuff back. Like,
yeah.
Jesus.
So think about that. Like you've got 2 sets of everything, and they're just going so that because it took so long to build it all, because they're building everything from scratch. You didn't have to worry about like, oh, well, we're done with this show at 11 o'clock at night. Somebody's got to tear this down till 4 a.m, drive the thing 250 miles, you know what I mean, to wherever the next thing is, build it all for the show the next night. You just can't do it. So you got to, you know, they had 2 sets of everything in these huge semi trucks that just would be driving to and from the venue.
Well, and let's not even like factor in the fact of world tours. We're going to go to Europe for the summer. We're going to go Europe to Japan to Australia, you know, like something like that. Like the logistics involved with something that big is just something that I think most normal people can't wrap their head around. I would venture to say most people, not even most normal people. I think most people couldn't wrap their head around, you know, a band like Metallica, for instance, is like, okay, yeah, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it overseas with language barriers, with like all kinds of shit. Pre-internet.
Yeah, well, but again, like a band like, again, with resources, it doesn't, like a band like Metallica is going to have their record company and are going to have people that speak the languages over there. They're going to have somebody on the road rhythm that can translate. You know what I mean? Their management team's going to have somebody there to deal with the stuff they got to deal with. You know, so with resources, you can do a lot, right? You can, you know, with with enough money. But you're talking about again, like just Tears. I mean, I shouldn't say it's little, but like that's Metallica playing 40,000 seaters every night for probably the same. I mean, you're talking about three, four, five, $6 million a night, $10 million a night. I mean, you just don't know with merch and stuff. Like
Yeah.
you can afford to, and like with the European tours, they'll do the same thing, but instead of shipping it, they'll get vendors over there to say we're going to do the same thing, but this is what all we need, and they'll get all the gear from somewhere. They either rent it for the length of the tour, right? And
Yeah.
then they load up all the trucks and they do the same shit in Germany that they would do in Iowa, but it's just over there. And then all the bands got to worry about just physically getting themselves there.
That's
And
insane.
and like, guitars and instruments are the only things that are a little bit squidgy, like because some people have their favorites, so and in that case, if you're flying or whatever, a musician would just, and that's another thing too that's a lot different. It depends because a lot of times you see guys where they play like 80 guitars. Like that's one of the things that to me is really cool about Tears is Roland Orzabal, who's the long haired guy.
Mm.
He plays a cherry Fender. I mean, and he plays that. He's been playing that guitar. That's his guitar. He plays one fucking guitar. He plays an acoustic when he plays an acoustic, but that he plays that one fucking electric. That's it. And he mixes in a couple of acoustic songs, and that's purely so somebody can take it off him and go tune it and make sure that strings are good and all that stuff, and then hand it back to him. But you see a lot of these guys like Dave Grohl, plays a couple, but he mostly plays that baby blue ES 335 that he plays all the time.
Yeah.
Right. But then that's just his guitar. I mean, so it's different with guys that have 100 and they don't care, but some guys will like just want to play their guitar. John Mayer, Prince played this 72 Honer, like that's Telecaster that he played all the time. John Mayer's got that natural finish Fender that's it's almost worn to the bone because he plays it so much. But like that thing never goes out. Like when you see that thing, that never leaves them. Like when they leave, they'll take it with them. They'll put it on a plane with them.
They're carrying it with them. Yeah.
Yeah. They physically got it with them.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to shows and it's mostly like, crazy metal guys or whatever, but like you just see the rack of all the crazy looking guitars back there and they're like swapping out guitars every song and stuff like that. And it's cool. I mean, I guess it's to each their own, right? But man, I'm just kind of like, that looks like a pain in the ass to travel with.
Now, sometimes there's a practical reason for that because you may have people that use alternate tunings.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where the guitar is tuned to something different.
Yeah.
And so the reason why you use multiple guitars is then a guitar tech is off stage while you're playing a song. They're getting the guitar into the tuning that you want. And then when they hand it to you, the guy didn't have to stand up there and figure out what note each string is tuned to or detune it in the middle of a show because it breaks the flow up for the show. But like, like obviously Tears doesn't do any weird tunings. They play everything in standard tuning, right? So he just plays his one fucking guitar the whole night. And but like the flip side though is when you guys that got 60 guitars, they'll just let the guitars go with all the stage and crew because they don't need to, like they'll just roll in and their rack of 20 guitars is in the back and they'll just use whatever they're going to use, and then the next night they'll use a different set. You know what I mean? So they eliminate the need of somebody that's like, no, I play this one. Right. And this one is the one I'm going to play. And so this one's never leaving my side.
What do you think is harder for a tech to deal with? A lot of guitars, one guitar?
Honestly, one guitar is harder to deal with because your margin for error is very low. If something goes wrong with that one, then what?
I would hope they'd have a backup, but I mean,
or what I'm saying? Like but like the reality is that they've got a lot to choose from no matter what happens. Cause a lot of things can foul up on a guitar. Right. Yeah. Or pedals, like that's the other thing too, is like, there's been times, sometimes, guitar players will have 6, 8, 10 pedals and each one of those pedals has a 12-inch patch cable. And like, all you got to have and it's all in line. So like if one of those patch cables goes, the whole damn board, the whole footboard goes down.
Yeah. First pedal goes out, the rest of the board's fucked.
And then you're like, what right? Like now, how do I, what do I do now? I got to go figure out, I got to start reverse engineering and figure out where, that's broken. So, I mean, I think, just like anything, I mean, I think those guys are doing other stuff, but, I would think that it's probably less stressful to have a ton of different guitars. But it's probably more work because you're checking them all and you're making, but again, none of that stuff is decided on the fly, right? Like they know that this guitar goes with this song. It's going to be the 7th song in the set.
They've probably got them lined up in the right order in the rack.
And they've done it long enough. They've got, but like really good guitar techs are also luthiers. I mean, to a degree, like I've seen guys replace hardware on the fly, like the pickups in a guitar.
Yeah.
Like I've seen pickups go bad. They hand a guy one and two, they'll have spare pickups and they'll just unmount a pickup and fix it like right there on the spot. And then get that guitar back into circulation if they want it. I mean, most of those dudes are freaks. I mean, they're experts at what they do.
Yeah.
So and 9 times out of 10, this is also what's crazy, and you've seen this, but a lot of times guitar techs, I mean, you're familiar with like the understudy concept in plays where whenever you're doing a play on Broadway, there's someone that learns the main part in case that person
gets sick or whatever.
Or gets hit by a bus.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, guitar techs are great guitar players and they will learn all of their person's guitar parts because you just never know. So I can't remember if it was a burn or an accident. Again, going back to Metallica, just I'm thinking about it. But this was back in the 90s, I think. But he either burned his hand on a pyro. I think maybe that was it. I think he was standing too close to a pyro. And
sounds familiar. Yeah, it sounds familiar. Stage. Yeah.
And he couldn't physically play, and his guitar tech just played out this rest of the show. Like he sang, but like his guitar tech knew all of his guitar parts, and so he just jumped up on stage so they could finish the show. So a lot of times again, most of the time, really good guitar techs are really, really good guitar players. And they will.
It's probably very valuable.
And that's something to just, you just fucking never know. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, you can't really do it with a singer, but, guitar, drum, instruments, if somebody can pull it off, you can get through, in a pinch, you could get through a show.
What do you miss about playing and going out and touring and stuff like that? And what don't you miss?
I mean,
or do you even think about it anymore? Like, is it something that's just kind of like that was a chapter, it's gone?
Yeah, it's a little of that. I mean, the other thing too is I think it's the benefit of perspective. I mean, to be honest with you, like what I missed about it right after it was over, I wouldn't miss now because of where I'm at in my life.
Right.
So we drove around the country. We just rolled into places. We would go check out. We were staying in some shit hotel. We would get to see stuff, go to local restaurants, load into some crappy little venue, meet people, have some drinks, shoot some Jaeger, play some songs. You know what I mean? Hang out, do it all over again. Roll them somewhere, go do a morning show interview somewhere, maybe go play golf in the afternoon. But like it was a very, weeks at a time we would do that. I would not do that now. You couldn't are you shitting me? Like sleeping in my own bed is like my greatest. I love, you know what I mean? Even now when I go out for business or something and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get home and get in my bed. Like I just didn't care back then. I was 22 or 3 or whatever. You know what I mean? It wasn't.
Is Metallica money going to get you out of that bed? Is Metallica money going to get you to?
Yeah, because here's the thing. With that kind of money, you can live. That's the other part of it too. Like we were trying to make it, right? So we were doing everything on the cheap, which was fine because we were just having a good time. You know what I mean?
22, nothing to worry about.
I mean, I miss physically playing, right? Like I miss that part. Like I miss just actually doing it in front of people, right? Like I still enjoy playing for people. Because again, much like we were talking about podcasting, I like making the stuff, and that's the only reason I do it. But someone saying I listened to that thing you did and I liked it is particularly satisfying.
Yeah, it puts it over the top, right?
And so that's probably the part of it that if I had to miss something is, believe it or not, we're leaving Tears for Fears last night, and our old bass. I looked to the right, and there was my old bass player.
Yeah.
And I haven't physically seen him in 15 years.
How was that? How'd that go?
It was awesome. Like I was just like, and his wife, and we were just like, and after the band broke up and he left too, we did some acoustic duo gigs together around town just for fun. And we sort of made a joke that we were in this band that was playing around, and we called ourselves No Shame because we just were playing covers and just like unapologetically just playing in shitty little bars. And people were like, weren't you guys in that band that like was that song on the radio or some shit?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, yeah, no shame. We don't care. It's just fun, you know? And we actually talked last night about maybe doing a reunion, like maybe he and I playing a couple shows.
That'd be fun.
So he wants me to come up to his house. I'm going to bring my guitar up there, and he lives up in Gwinnett, and we're just going to fuck around and just see if anything's there. And we may, play. I mean, I'm sure we could find a bar to book us. You know what I mean? Like, because we don't need to make any money. We just want to, go yutz around. But that part of it, I don't miss, the, it's just, it was fun, but it was hard. I mean, I don't think people think it's all, even with the big bands. I mean, you don't have any roots.
Right.
You're just completely sedentary, right? Migratory, or you're wandering. You're just roaming around.
Vagabond,
Like,
yeah.
even when I was home, you couldn't maintain relationships because you're never here long enough to, you know what I mean? Like, that wasn't particularly enjoyable, to be honest. And you're exhausted all the time because your body playing is hard physically. Like, if you are energetic and whatever, but weird hours, we were just drunk all the time. Like,
you never get to rest properly when you're not at home either.
No. And like, honestly, when we would come off of a leg of it, like we'd go out on tour for 2, 3, 4, 8 weeks, where you're just doing that every day. And I would come home and lay in bed for like 3 days. I would get up to eat and go to the bathroom. And it would just take that to like get yourself, it's hard to work out. You couldn't do anything to take care of yourself. You know what I mean? Like, it was really brutal. I mean, that's why I think it's young people that do it. Because there's a point, like, now, again, if you're doing it when you're older, like these guys, there's a level of economy where they don't have to live super hard. They've got a lot of people doing the shit. Because the other thing too is we were carrying all our gear in. We didn't have crew.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we were loading in our gear. We were breaking shit. You just play this great show. It's like funny how you say you do the rock star thing, right? You play this show. You got a song on the radio. Everybody's there having a good time. You're signing CDs and shit after the show. They clear the room out, and then all of a sudden we're breaking down drum kits and carrying, like amps down staircases. I mean, it's like, it was really a kind of a hilarious sort of irony.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the illusion of what all just happened. And then here I am at 3:00 in the morning, and I'm coming down off the half a bottle of Jaeger I drank, tonight. I just had girls wanting to do stuff with you in the women's bathroom and, all that sort of stuff. And now I'm lugging my buddy's bass drum. The two of us are trying to not fall down a flight of stairs, to get it back out to the thing so we can load it up and then drive 200 miles overnight, because we're done with all that at 1:30 in the morning, and 200 miles away, we've got a 7:00 morning show we got to do the next day.
Ugh.
It just was, it's a funny world, but yeah, the actual playing and people listening to you play is a pretty surreal, it's hard to describe if people have never performed anything live. I mean, I would imagine it's the same thing for comedians or people that do plays.
Sure. That instant audience feedback.
And just like people are being entertained by you, right? There's a certain amount of drug-like,
you're holding sway over the room. Yeah, absolutely.
Joy that comes from that. I mean, it's fun to realize that you're entertaining people.
And that's something too that I feel like it's tough to replicate, right? Like, it's hard to replicate any of that. Like, you can be live, you can stream live and have tons of people in your chat. Like, say you're a Dr. Disrespect or a Shroud, like, it's not the same, right? Like, it's definitely not the same as if they were sitting up on a stage playing a game, on a big screen and people watching them and cheering and stuff like that. That's got to be a completely different charge. And I don't know if anybody even does that. Well, I guess you got like Major League Gamers and stuff like that and big tournaments and stuff. That's got to be a completely different feeling than I'm just sitting at home and there's a few hundred people watching me play this game. Because then you have a big moment, everybody celebrates, but you hear nothing. It's just kind of like, it's got to be like a weird mind fuck. But I don't think there can be anything that's probably as that I could imagine having more of a charge than pulling off something awesome in front of a huge group of people.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I mean, and the few times that we did play in like really big shows, I mean, that's a whole also just another level. I mean, when you talk about thousands of people, you know what I mean? Like it's a hard to describe, irreplicable sort of. I mean, we did Music Midtown, once, and we played right before Sheryl Crow. It was like the 7 o'clock slot on Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there had to have been 40,000 people.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not people. That's an entity.
It's a
right?
blob.
Like,
yeah.
And they are ready for you to do, you know what I mean? Like they expect you to give it to them. Right. This is one thing I've heard comedians talk about, right? Then I've heard Seinfeld talk about this in particular. I think I heard a roundtable thing with him and Chris Rock and somebody else talk about it. Once you get to be a known comedian, it's dangerous because are people laughing because you're funny? And Gervais has said this, he's like, to be honest, I'm at a point where it doesn't matter what I do, people are going to laugh. And that's dangerous. Because they come in there going, it's Ricky Gervais. If he says it, it must be funny. But is it? Right. And so, in a room of 100 people, you can tell really quick, like who's into it and who's not. You can't disappoint. I mean, you can. You'd have to really fuck it up. But in that scenario, we couldn't lose. Right. Yeah. Like there's no way you go out there and people aren't going to be ready to throw down. Right. Like it's just, But it's just weird. The sound is weird. It's different. It's like you look out and are like, what am I looking at? Like this is crazy. Right. And so I think that there's a certain amount of, just that. I mean, the flip side of that, I'll tell you a hilarious story. You're recording this video, right? This will go on YouTube. Okay.
The YouTubes.
For those of you that are listening to this audio only, you'll have to. So we played at this place called Floyd's, which is in Tallahassee.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, we were playing with Creed. Remember them?
Oh yeah.
This was before Creed was Creed. Right?
Sure.
They're from Orlando area, right? And we played at this place, and it was about 200, 300 people or something. Like, well, no, Floyd's is maybe a little bigger, but it's like a cotton clubby kind of room.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, those big spools, those big wooden things that like baling wire. And a lot of times in places will flip them over on their side and there'll be tables.
Yes.
But they're really just those huge spools.
Or really cool guys in high school had them in their yards.
Yes. So we were in a place, we were owning for Creed. Nobody really knew we were in Orlando yet. It was really early on. We're in there. And I shit you not, there's about, including the 5 of us with the group, there's about 12 people in the room. And that included the bartenders, the door guy, us, and like 3. But there was one dude sitting in the very back, and he was sitting in one of those spool things. And I shit you not, there were about 7 Bud Heavy bottles like on the thing in front of him, just sitting there by himself. We start playing, and there's no shit, 3-4 people in the room when we start our set. We're about 2 minutes into the first song, and the guy's sitting there like this. So he's got his hand
just buzzed out of his mind,
his chin in his hand, watching us. And I look up, and he goes like this. He goes,
"Oh no!"
And just the thumbs down. Like, just gives me the thumbs down. And like, we all saw it and like just laughed. I mean, it was one of those, but that's what I try to tell people, right? Like, this is the life. I mean, and 3 days later, we could have been playing in some town we played out 1,000,000 times, and there's 500 people in there and everybody, you know what I mean? And it was just like, but man, that dude just did not, you know what I mean? Like, he was not having it. And it just is like this weird, it's such a strange, But like you're saying, when bands get big, like that's the thing, man, is like it's sort of like minor league baseball play. Like by the time people get to the majors, you have no idea the shit that they've been through to get there.
Yeah.
You know, like and the stuff you did and the crazy, you know, where you come into somebody, you know, your manager or somebody books you at something and you don't really know what it is, and you go in and it's like a fucking petting zoo, you
Mm.
know, or some shit going on. You know what I mean? It's like what? It's like Spinal Tap again. It's like puppet show Spinal Tap. And you're like, what am I doing? Why are we here? You know what I mean? Like who thought this was a good idea? You know what I mean? Like to put us on this thing, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting too, like I guess you know, you brought up, we were talking about comedians a little bit ago, and I think what's interesting about comedians is they get to see, I say they, but a lot of comedians get to see both sides of that, like maybe working a big theater. And then during the week, a lot of people don't know those guys are working out in small clubs. Like they're working out in, you know, places like the Comedy Store or the Cellar up in New York or the Stand up in New York, where you're talking about like 40, 50 seats, you know, so they get that, like, that's where they work out their stuff. That's where you see them holding a pad of paper, like, you know, like, all right, what am I going to try next kind of stuff. Which that's like, to me as a comedy fan, is like my favorite thing to see. One of my favorite shows, I've seen Bill Burr probably 6, 7 times at this point, but one of my favorites was he wanted to play the Atlanta Punchline, the original Punchline, before they closed, and he had just released a special. So he literally shows up and like all of his, you know, his hour is burnt up because he's already released it to the public. So he's up there with a fucking pad of paper working on new shit. And we got to watch him do that for an hour. And it was just like, holy shit. Like just seeing the process, I think to me is more like, when last time we got to go to New York City, we went to a couple of shows at the Stand, on the same night. And, you know, you never know who's going to fucking pop up. They sit us in the front row, which is really terrifying because it's not like sitting front row at a big theater like the Tabernacle, where the stage is like way high up and you're looking up. It's literally like when you go to these tiny clubs, it's one step up higher than the floor you're sitting at, you know? And so we're sitting front row, and you smell the cologne the comedian's wearing. That's how close they are to you, right? And you know, but the thing I love about that stuff and going during the week is like, you never know who's going to pop up. So like on one of our shows, Jim Gaffigan shows up, you know, and like, he's just working on new shit. And you're just like, this is the coolest. But I think I've always found that interesting because someone like Jim Gaffigan can work a really big room and have those people that are there to see Jim Gaffigan, and he's got that, like, yeah, they're going to laugh. But then he's going to turn around and play a 40-seat room on a Wednesday just to see what the reaction is, to get a real reaction, because I think you almost have to with that, right? You have to pick up the vibe and know what's going on with the things you're writing. We just got done watching the Carlin documentary on HBO.
It, but I want to see it.
Oh man, for those out there that haven't seen the Carlin documentary, it was done by Judd Apatow. It's a 2-part, and both parts are like 2 hours long. It's long. It's really well done. But the thing that was cool about it was they covered the fact that he started out as a really, like, you know, he was on variety shows. He did really clean comedy, because that's what he knew. That's how he knew comedy. And then it went through, you know, where he turned into the hippy dippy weather guy. Like it just like all the different things that Carlin did. And there was even one part they were interviewing all kinds of comedians, you know, Seinfeld, Bill Burr was in there. And in one thing, like it was when Carlin first started doing what he became really popular for, which was like, I'm going to hit you with some really fucking crazy political commentary, and then some fart jokes, and then some really crazy, like some really poignant things that still hold up to this day. Right. You know, Burr was even saying, he's like, we went to this show in Boston to make fun of him. Like, cause he was getting that reputation for being the guy that's still the same dude he was in 1977. And now, you know, you're coming up on the mid 80s and everybody's just kind of like, you're old news, shit like that. And he's like, and then we got there and something had changed in his act, and he just came out and was just firing missiles at the crowd. And like to see, I think the thing I enjoyed about that documentary so much is to see, and it's something we talked about in the offline show before we started this podcast, was someone who knew that he realized he needed to change his approach. Because I think people get into a situation, and it's much like what you were talking about with Seinfeld and Gervais and Chris Rock. You get into this thing, well, people show up and they love me. So, I mean, it's kind of like a champion that's undefeated, right? Like at some point, they're like, well, I'm good and I don't need to train as hard. And then they get beaten. Like it's almost without fail, especially in something like MMA. The champion, when they get beat, that's what's going to take them to the next level because they've got nothing challenging them to up their game. So it was just a cool story to see Carlin see someone like Sam Kinison hit the scene and be like, oh, I've got to do things different. I can't just do wordplay all the time. I can't just, talk about how weird these words sound. Like I have to actually start talking about what's going on in the world or just talking about what's important to me. And just to see that change is really cool. And I always love seeing an artist kind of you see it with musicians a lot. Like when musicians change up the way a new album sounds. And yeah, they'll absolutely alienate a portion of their audience because their audience wants, no man, we wanted this. This is the sound we fell in love with, and this is not what I'm going for. Bob Dylan's pretty popular for doing that.
I was just thinking Dylan's legendary. I mean, Dylan would almost do it. Dylan would do it on purpose. Like the whole thing with Dylan's Electric record, was
purge your audience.
No, like, somebody said, I'm not going to remember the story right. If I'm remembering correctly, it might have been a review or something he read or whatever and said, well, Dylan does this and that's what Dylan does. And as long as he does that, like he could never make an electric record. And Dylan went, well, guess it's time to make an electric record.
Yeah. It's like challenge accepted.
Like, and I mean, and the whole thing was like, that's the thing is he's just like, I've already done that. You know what I mean? And that's another thing that fans are really, like, people like it's interesting in the larger scope of how people won't apply the same lens to others as they do themselves. Like people want to evolve and grow and get better, right? Like, so of course bands don't sound the same. You know what I mean? Like, and people get so pissed if they do like an experimental record or something, right? And it's just like, well, like, yeah, like, are you just going to be the same person you always are your whole life? You've always got the same things to say. You've got the same perspective. You don't learn and get interested in. I mean, the Beatles they got away with, they were the Beatles, but like they did some weird shit, man. Like, because it's like, that's what artists do. Like you can't be creatively great and not be willing to explore. Right.
Right.
And so, but then when you explore, you get people that are supposed to be fans that get mad at you for fucking exploring. And it's just like, well, what, like, do you like me or do you like, I don't get it. Right. Like, how can you,
it's a mind fuck that you see content creators go through too, where people are like, just play what makes you happy or just do the content that makes you happy. And then like, they do that. They're like, cool, I want to try this game out and nobody shows up. And they're like, well, what the fuck? Like they said to play what makes me happy. And what's interesting about music and I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on this, but I think it has something to do with the fact that music puts, especially depending on where you're at in your life, puts these very important fucking soundtracks, obviously, but it takes you back to a certain fucking place. And people want to keep revisiting that place. People that are non-musicians, right? People that aren't actually the ones making and playing the music. Like they want to be constantly right. Like, oh man, I was, the love of my life. I met her and we listened to this album all the time, blah, 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 blah. And then, a different sounding album comes out and they feel betrayed because they're like, no, this was our band we had together, So you almost understand it from a fan perspective too, because they tie completely different strings to those songs that mean so much to them than the artist does. So I've always found that interesting because I've definitely had bands that I listen to and the new album comes out and I'm like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting, but what's funny is a lot of times I'll put that record down and I'll come back to it in a couple of years and I'm like, this thing is fucking incredible. It's amazing how like sometimes it's amazing when you got an artist that can be just slightly ahead of their audience, and then all of a sudden the album that came out that everyone hated 2 years ago is all people want to listen to. And it's got to be a mind fuck for the artist too.
Yeah, I mean, music's highly associative, right? Like I mean, all last night, Holly was doing it. Like they would play a song and she would be like, "Oh, I was in high school and this, I mean, that's a thing. I mean, I do it, everybody does it."
Smells do that, and music does that.
Yeah, but this thing is a theory I just talked about to somebody. This to me is, I think I've been trying to think about this and sort of crack the code. And again, this is just ignoring trolls and people that just hate shit because they like to hate shit.
Sure.
Why with a lot of these highly loved properties in art, usually now I'm talking about film, music, television, people tend to take things they love and then at some point just tear them apart. And I think I've figured out what it is. And exactly what you said is, I think it's a beautiful thing, and why it's powerful, because I think people tend to take a lot of ownership of things that they actually don't own.
Right.
Like, you don't own that song. You have nothing to do with it, but you have created ownership because you've attached it to something. I lost my virginity to that song. I danced my first dance with my future wife to that song. Whatever it is you put with that song, they played it before all my baseball games, like whatever, there's the thing. Right. Then like, here's what I think happens when people love things. They start to think in their mind what they think the next step should be.
Right.
And then it doesn't matter what that next step is. As long as it's not what they imagined it was going to be, it's automatically bad. So I just rewatched Lost. I just finished it. Right. And I remember how bad people said they hated the last two seasons. Even when I told people I was rewatching it, they were just like, "Oh, do you just stop watching it after season 4? Or whatever." I rewatched Lost, and I'm not going to lie to you. The last 3 seasons of Lost are not bad. Right?
Yeah.
It got a little afield of what it started as, because like, how many more seasons are you going to put together at them just being on the fucking island, right? You got to do something else, right? They've just been doing that forever.
Yeah.
Right? It got a little weird, but was any of it a big divestiture, really? I mean, they got into the backstory of the island, the lore of this stuff. And and it ties into what I think is just like, no, people just imagined, they didn't know all that backstory. So they created their own. This is like with Star Wars, right? And people hate the next thing because they've decided what they think the next thing should be. And then when it's not that, they don't actually give the next thing a chance because it's not what they expected. So it must be bad.
They've already defeated it. Kind of like just pick any, like not any sequel. There's good sequels out there. The Top Gun sequel's something that is flying in the face of that, right? But like most of the time, people are like, "Oh yeah, a sequel's coming out. It's going to be just as badass," and they build it up, and it just doesn't end up being what they want it to be.
Or it's just like, I don't know if it's going to be good, bad, or indifferent, but I think this character should do this. I think this person should do that. If I was writing the story, it would resolve itself like this.
Yeah, this person needs to die. Yeah.
And then it doesn't happen, and they just automatically hate it. And it's like, and the reason why I thought about records, exactly your point. If you're really a fan of a band, and I don't think this is your fault, I think this is human. Yeah. But you would just go, I'm going to go into this next record of this band I really like, and I'm not going to think about what it might be at all. I'm just going to listen to it like I'm listening to something new, right? And that's why when you pick it up later and go, "Oh, this is really good," because you'd already written that album in your mind.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that. And so your natural inclination there is to just go, "Oh, well, it's trash." So, that's to me, like, now I actually try to carry that forward and say to myself, all right, I'm going to do my best to put aside. I mean, I'm going to have opinions about what I think should happen next in a story because I like stories, and, of course I'm a thinking person and I want to do whatever, but let me just trust the people that have made this thing I love and see if maybe they take me to a place that's better than I'm at, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, maybe it'll be better, but you have to be open to that possibility. Otherwise it will not happen. How good it is.
The perfect example of this is Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, people hate it. I didn't like it, but I did notice that people's dislike of Game of Thrones started to part ways with Game of Thrones as soon as they departed the books. As soon as they departed what was already written by George R. R. Martin, like then it became a mystery. Like we all knew, like anybody who read the books, like okay, well we know at least up to this point this is what's going to happen, and then they departed from the books to finish out the series, and it just wasn't what everybody was planning on it being, you know?
I also didn't dislike how they ended Game of Thrones, and I was in the extreme minority. But this is the other thing I think people do, which happens, is people love something so this happens a lot. People love something so much. I mean, people were freaks about that show, right? It was a phenomenon, right? I noticed a turn when they announced that they were done. And this is what I think happens too. People are angry that it's going to be over
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want it to be over because
Yeah.
they like it. And then I think they start doing this game of talking themselves into hating it. So when it ends, they're not sad.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
They're doing mental gymnastics with themselves to go, if I can convince myself this is garbage, I'm not going to leave here going, I'm so sad that that show's over.
You know, I told my wife, I'm pretty sure that when people revisit it later, it'll make more sense. Or people who get into it later and aren't part of the whole like torch wielding mob that wanted to go after, you know, D&D over how they wrote it out and finished it out.
Yeah.
I think it'll be looked at favorably down the road. You touched on it slightly. But Star Wars is another big one. I mean, look at the reception that the prequels got. You know, the episodes 1, 2, and 3. There's a whole generation of people that love those movies because they were kids when they came out. Just like the people who hated it were kids when the first 3 came out. And you can go on and on with the next 3, right? Even that. Now you've got people that are like, they love The Mandalorian. They didn't like Boba Fett. There's a lot of people hating on Obi-Wan, you know, but I don't know, like I like Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I've watched all of it, but like I guess I'm just not. I guess I've never tied Star Wars to really hard memories like I would with music, right? Like what we talked about with music. So for me, I'm just like, those are fun movies. I would watch those a couple times. I wasn't the biggest fan of the prequels. I thought the newer trilogy was okay, but I think that people had so many years to build that shit up. I mean, you had people that were 5, 6, 7 when the original trilogy came out. So they had all this time to build their idea of what the Star Wars universe was like and what was going to happen. And now we're going back into the whole Obi-Wan thing. And I don't know if you saw the article that came out about Moses Ingram.
Yeah, terrible.
And like she was like, yeah, they just went ahead and told me up front that there's people who are just going to be racist to you. Just be prepared for that. They're just going to be mad that a person of color is in this role and doing, you know, and going after one of their beloved characters. You know, there's people who can't separate that at all. There's people who absolutely feel like that shouldn't be the case. What is it? The Boyega got a shit ton of racist stuff said to him during the last 3, and then the one Asian chick, and from
Rose,
she got a lot too, and it was just kind of so now this has just become protocol with the Star Wars universe of like, hey, any of our minority actors and actresses, we need to let them know, hey, since you've got kind of a big role here, the trolls are just going to come after you. And there's nothing we can really do about that. So you just have to kind of mentally prepare yourself. And it's so fucked up. It's so fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, so the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater was Empire.
Okay.
My dad took me to see Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 6. Okay. So we went to a McDonald's after, and I got the glass, the Empire. Remember when
the printed glass? Yeah.
Yes. So I had it and I lost it at one point. I'm so sad, but my dad's passed and that's a big, huge memory for me, right? With my dad.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I took ownership of that whole thing really early in life. Um, this is another thing about fandom that's really kind of screwy, right? So, like the other thing too is when the new movies are going to come out, everybody starts saying it's like, don't just rehash the same shit. We want new story. Don't just give us the same thing over. Don't give us the same thing over. So the Abrams first one comes out, and that's really just A New Hope. That's really just episode 4 again. There's a planet with a big laser on it that blows up other planets. They have to go. I mean, they mixed in some shit. They killed Han Solo. Spoilers. They did some other stuff. But basically that story wasn't radically different, right? Then whatever. So then cue Ryan Johnson, who was the Last Jedi, the second guy, right? Ryan Johnson just flipped the fucking table over, right? And just started. And then everybody fucking wants to kill Ryan Johnson and hated, the whole thing. For me, I loved The Last Jedi, the Ryan Johnson, the middle one. And here's why. This is what Ryan Johnson did that everybody was so pissed about after they were so pissed about don't make the same thing. And they're like, all right, so he does something completely different. And they're like, how could you do that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, but here's the thing. So Ryan Johnson was trying to run them down a path of this. At the end of Last Jedi, if you recall, there were the little stable kids, right? And the little kid reaches over and force grabs the broom, right? And all of that is about John Boyega, and they're setting it all up. And what they're basically setting it up as is that Jedi now and people that are force sensitive don't have to be from this bloodline, right? One of the things that kind of always irritated me about the whole thing, honestly, just from a sort of a social statement standpoint, not to sound all woke and shit, so I get canceled by the crazy fucking, but it was all about Skywalkers, right? It was about everybody that was special was blood related, right? Like it was Leia, Vader, you know what I mean? Luke, there's the best ones are in this thing. And it had a royalty vibe to it.
Yeah, very royalty.
The concept of royalty is gross to me. Like to me, honestly, the fact that Britain still has royals to me is just disgusting. The idea that somehow you have better station in life just because of your DNA is just a gross concept in general. It's yucky, right? So, and I'm like, oh shit, Ryan Johnson is turning shit over and basically going, it doesn't matter if you're a fucking Skywalker. Like sometimes the poor fucking stable boy is a guy that can be special in the galaxy, right? And then everybody flips their shit. And what do? They make Daisy a goddamn Skywalker, right? And it's just like, and the thing that irritates me about that is like people wanted to shit Ben Solo again, same thing, Leia, right? Like it's all in the line, right? Kylo Ren, like, and it's just like, to me, it's like, hey, this is cool. Like now, guess what? That just opened up the universe to tell all kinds of fucking stories. You're not tied to the Skywalkers anymore. There's an infinite amount of new stories you can tell, right? Because you've just said, oh, we told you the story about the Skywalkers and yeah, they were good, but you don't have to be a Skywalker, right? To be, somebody badass or to be prominent in the whole thing. And that's what I think Johnson was going for in the film and would have done in the third film. But, again, people were just like, quit doing the same thing. And then they're like, you didn't do the same thing. Go fuck yourself. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like that kind of shit just makes me wild. Cause I just think if you look at Jedi, The Last Jedi, for example, in a bubble, you're like, okay, well, he did what you wanted. He was going to spin this off into something totally different, right? Like it was not going to be the Skywalker saga anymore. Right? Like we were moving away. We were going to put the Skywalkers to bed, right? Like, and start and move on. And the fans just wouldn't let it happen. Right? And that's why you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit, right? Like that's why that's why you get what you get because everybody lost their fucking minds. So again, it's just like ownership and then saying, I expect this or I want that. And then they don't like that either. So, it's just, again, to my point, it's like, just enjoy them for what they are. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm maybe partial. I mean, I'm not kidding, man. When I walked into, why am I blanking on, what was the name of the first new one? Last Jedi was the second one. Rise of Skywalker was the third one. The first one was, Force Awakens.
Force Awakens, yeah.
When I walked into the Force Awakens and the music hits and the big yellow fucking Star Wars shows up on screen.
Yeah.
Cried like a baby.
Yeah.
Immediate tears. My wife was just like, seriously? And I was like, you have no idea like how much of my child, like I just never thought I would see this. I never thought I would get to sit here and get to see a new Star Wars movie
Yeah.
after the prequel debacle and all that. I just never thought this would happen. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
And then I just sat there and enjoyed. I knew it was the same fucking movie as the first, as episode 4. Didn't care.
Didn't give a shit.
Like, didn't care at all. Just sitting there as my fucking 8-year-old self, just loving every fucking lightsaber sound and fucking laser and beep boop from R2D. Like, you know, like I just wish more people would approach shit like that.
It would be nice. And, you know, I think the problem is it's just fanatics just build this construct in their head and how they think things should go. Like you said, with, you know, new albums that are coming out, they've already written it in their head. Marvel is going through it with Miss Marvel. She's Muslim and people
don't like brown people, but yeah.
Right. I mean, it's the same, but it's the same thing as what's happening with the Star Wars universe. It's just, you don't fit what I picture being in this role at all. And I think it sucks because I think people are out to ruin things for themselves and ruin things for other people. It's like, you know what? I'm going to ruin this actress's life. It's no fault of her own. She just took the role, you know, and who wouldn't? Yeah. Who wouldn't take a role in the Marvel universe? Like, that's stupid if you don't, right? Like, who wouldn't take a role in a Star Wars movie? Like, that is a lot of people's dreams. And I think part of it too, some of it comes from the fact that I think people were mad that the new people that get casted in these things maybe necessarily aren't giant super uber fans of it. They're just like, it's a movie.
Yeah, they're doing their job.
Yeah. They're doing their job.
What a crazy idea. Just doing my job.
Just doing my job. And here comes someone along to just shit on me for no reason. And I think that bugs people. Like, it bugged a lot of people that Bill Burr got his role in Mandalorian when he's classically shit on Star Wars and nerd culture. And then he gets his part and he does a great job with it, but people are pissed because he's like, but he shit on Star Wars. How dare you?
Yeah, I mean, and that's like, you know, but that's where, you know, unfortunately, like the politics of life in today come into play. I think I sent you what magazine or newspaper was it in? It might have been, was it Fox News or something about Star Trek? Did I send you that?
Yeah, about Star Trek being woke.
Right? About like, well, they've ruined Star Trek and made it woke. And I just sent it to Lopez and I'm like, tell me you've never seen Star Trek without telling me you've never seen Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like the TV show that had to fight for a black woman to kiss a white man in 1968 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Right.
And had androgynous characters and males walking around in dresses and all kinds of stuff.
And there's no capitalism doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
There's no longer the pursuit of material gain in the Star Wars universe. Like the bettering ourselves as a people, it's completely inclusive, right? And they're mad because they add like, you know, gay people and, you know, other themes to the new Star Trek properties or whatever. And again, that's just where like, again, like bigots, it's like, it's just, and I think it's great because I just love the fact that all these assholes take the bait.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like it's, you know, it's like, what do you say? It's like, welcome to Spot a Homophobe Month.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is Spot a Homophobe Month. Like, people have a problem with something and they can't, especially now, they can't help but to voice their opinion and to be like, hey, this has gone too far. Why are there pride flags on everything? Why are we so woke? Dude, I had a parent use the word woke with me not too long ago. And like, these woke CEOs, I think is what was said. And I was like,
oh boy,
God, dude, will you just stop watching Fox News? Will you please just get your own opinion about something? Because then I take him 2 steps past that and he doesn't know He doesn't know how to continue the conversation.
Of course not.
I'm just like, dude, you're just speaking on buzzwords. Stop. Don't you just what it comes down to, and I think what it comes down to with a lot of people is they're in their bubble, man. Most of the people they're talking to feel the same way. So they can say this and feel smart for saying these things because they're around people who agree with them. And this is nothing new from what me and you have talked about, and it's dangerous on either side. It's dangerous to be completely surrounded with people you agree with all the time. Like, I think you need to disagree with folks, and because that forces you to at least think about your argument a little more.
Well, and I'll loop it all the way back around, which is what we talked about in offline, and we talked about now about being a content creator. It's conceptually the same thing, and it's this. It's like, if you want to create, you've got to be the kind of person, if you want to be successful, I think, because to your point about the echo chamber is like, people do that because they need other people to validate them. Right. Like, if you're a super conservative or super liberal, spouting off super conservative or super liberal talking points around other super conservative or super liberal people lets them to go, yes,
yeah,
you're right. They just want to say something, and then all those people validate them. And it's like with creating content, it's like if you shouldn't do it to seek validate, right? Like, it's got to be an internal thing, which, again, I don't know if I'm just lucky or like DNA wise, I've never really needed that. And so, like, for me, my opinions are my opinions, and I don't really need, and that's why a lot of my liberal friends, because I'm mostly liberal, right? Like, I deviate sometimes on certain issues, but a little, not a lot. I wouldn't say I'm never really conservative, but
sure.
But like, I'll occasionally like not be on par with like super far left stuff, and my super far left friends, it just catches them completely off guard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yo, I'm just a thinking person. Like, I'm not trying to be on a team. Like, I'm not here to try to make you feel good about me, so you then point at me and go, I like you, or you're right. Like, I'm just trying to work through my shit and figure out what I think. And that's all that matters. That doesn't have to line up with you. Yeah. But I don't think a lot of people do it that way. I don't think they're trying to line up with everybody around them because they want to be included. They want to be a part of that, want to be validated. They want people to, and I recognize a lot of people are like that. You know what I mean? And I'm just not. And I'm honestly really grateful that I'm not.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, just because I don't, for me at least, I can just arrive where the natural process takes me based on my own journey. I'm not trying to modify the path I'm taking to go down a way that someone else thinks I should go.
Right. You're not just trying to, like, it's that whole, like, I don't want to be shunned by the tribe. And I think a lot of people get scared of that, right? They get scared of, like, being sent out, right? Like, oh, well, this person doesn't agree with everything that we agree with, so you got to go. Yeah, people are afraid to do that. Like, it just feels more comfortable to be surrounded by folks. Like, I feel like it's super gross to be too far one way or the other. Like, I feel like there's something wrong when you're just like, no, everything this stands for, I'm in agreement with. It just doesn't sit right with me. It's just kind of like, you mean you're not allowed to challenge any of that? Nope, can't do it. Can't challenge it. Yeah. Keep it right there.
Yeah, you know whose team I'm on? My team, and Holly Furfer's team.
Yeah,
and a handful of humans that I am close to's team, and even those people we may not always agree, and that's fucking okay.
There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah,
right. Like, now there's some fundamental things, sure, and those tend to get out on the fringes, right? Like, if you hate gay people, we're not going to be friends.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been nice if we could have found a way to work that out, but I got some lines in the sand I draw.
Yeah. I'm going to be happy when a U-Haul full of you get pulled over and taken out before you can get to a pride parade in Idaho.
I mean, and like, how terrifying is that? Just like from how those dudes were dressed and all that stuff. So it's just so,
so clearly what they were about to do. So clear with that. And then, just seeing that, and then in such close proximity to seeing that 10-minute video that they play at the January 6th committee, which you're just kind of like, holy fuck, that sounds terrifying. Like, to hear all the police radio chatter and just to watch what happened. Like, you knew it was bad when they were reporting on it, but that's like to see it all edited together like that, to see how it all unfolded and to see how crazy that got, and to still have people that were just kind of like, yeah, it's just another day. It was just a
Bro, I know people on social media that I know personally that still just act like that's just no,
big deal.
like, just, it would, like, if somebody got mad and, threw a beer bottle at a wall in an Applebee's, like, just no big, just, yeah, it was, so I guess they shouldn't have done it, but I mean, it wasn't that big a deal.
Heat of the moment. Fuck it.
People died. They broke it. Never has happened before in history. People broke into the fucking United. I mean, it's like, like, what planet are you people living on? Right? Like, it's a different world than me. Fortunately now, again, the other advantage of just being like team Furfur Arnold, you know what I mean? Is like, that shit used to really bother me. And now I'm just like, I've done a good job of curating my universe of friends and family and people I care about to where that's not us. And I'm just going to stay right. I'm just going to live right here. And, I'm going to not let those people come in and taint the air in here. You know what I mean? Like, I got it nice and climate controlled the way I want it.
It reminds me. It reminds me of in the Carlin documentary where there's one part where they were talking about how he was basically really just hard on humanity in general. He was like, we deserve it. I'm loving watching it. I want to see it burn to the ground, like all that stuff. And they were talking about how like was he really feeling that way, or was that his character? It was like, and it was just cool the way they just kind of left it kind of up to interpretation. I know I feel a certain way. I'm sure it'd be fun to talk about once you get to see it. But like I think me and the wife sat and just talked about that aspect of it for almost an hour. Where you're just kind of like, holy shit. Like, I've gone back since too and watched a couple of his specials, and his good overarching points that are timeless are excellent. There's some stuff in between that doesn't age well. There's absolutely some stuff in between that doesn't age well, but I think you'd find that with any comedian, like, because it's such a time capsule of what's going on then and what's acceptable to say then. And go back and watch Eddie Murphy Raw. That shit doesn't fly today. Like, that's a very different type of shit, especially with things like Pride now, with all that stuff. It's just not gonna fly in the same way. So the overarching themes and the points that he had in his big points are still there. But yeah, it does, like, some of the other stuff doesn't age well, but it was just Apatow did a great job of being like, I'm going to let you decide if you think he was serious about how he felt about humanity. And it's kind of one of those like head scratchers. You're like, man, was he really feeling that way? But then, you hear accounts of everybody in his life. It was like, no, he was always a happy dude when we hung out. Like, it was just, he turned this thing on and he just funneled it all into the stage, and it's just fucking crazy.
Well, and that's why I generally dislike any sort of like, I don't like the cancel culture thing in almost any capacity.
Yeah, same.
For historical stuff.
Yeah.
Like, even if you do stuff currently, like, people make mistakes, and I think it's all about now. Like, we've heard me say this before. Like, to me, everything anyone says ever, anytime, like, intent absolutely matters.
Yeah.
Like, what were they intending to do? Because sometimes people are going to say the wrong thing and maybe hurt somebody's feelings. And if they weren't trying to hurt people, or they have an opportunity to go, you know what, you're right, I shouldn't do that, and they can try to self-correct, that should be encouraged in society, right? Not isolated, right? Like, allow people a chance to make things right, because we all screw up, right? But these things where they find tweets from people from like 30 years ago, or not tweets, but like, you find all this old
interviews, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, man, like, because especially for that kind of stuff where it's social commentary, like, the zeitgeist at the time is what dictates all that stuff, So, like, again, like, back in the day, like, like, words you could use or slurs that were used, like the Eddie Murphy thing is obviously like using the F word for gay people, right? And that sort of stuff, right? Like, that wasn't, of course, now that's completely unacceptable. At the time, it was not like it is now. And yes, it was wrong, but nobody knew it was wrong. And there was nobody telling people it was wrong. Right. And it's like, so my question is like, if you find that, is that person like that now? If they're like that now, then fucking cancel away.
Yeah.
Right. If they're not like that now, why are we doing like, why do we have to like, we've got to use our brains, right? Like as human people and say, because every one of us has said some shit that would get us canceled. Right.
Sure.
If it was, if anybody cared about us, which they don't, we're not on anybody's radar enough where we're going to get canceled.
Not yet.
Right. But
20
you know
years
what I'm
from
saying?
now.
But like, yeah, but like if it was like, it's like, am I like that now? I've said things. I grew up in like an incredibly like I grew up in the deep South, the rural deep South.
Mhm.
So did you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and your situation's different because because you are in a minority, right? And I'm not. I mean, you probably were accepted by the majority and heard a lot of shit that you were probably just like, oof. But you know, but like for me, it's like there's a whole lot of things that were so acceptable that I'm sure I said and did that now, if now me would be just as upset with myself as anybody else would be if any of that stuff resurfaced or if I realized I had done something or said something, right? And it's
Yep.
like, so if that's true, like I'm an ally now. I try hard to be, right? I try hard to be supportive of people of color and gay people and all that stuff. And it's like, so is that what you want to do? Like you want to also throw me out if I screwed up, 15 years ago or 20 years ago or did something like that to me where it just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if we're all trying to strive towards this goal, why are you trying to isolate and sort of, people that quite clearly did not intend to do any harm, know now that things are different and things that they said before were wrong. Shouldn't that be our goal as a people to always try to be better? Because 25 years from now, there'll be things now that are acceptable that people will look back and go, ooh, that was gross.
Oh yeah. I try to pick out what that would be. Like I'm just like, what would be unacceptable? And I thought of something the other day. And I cannot remember what it was because we were talking about. It was me and the wife, and we were talking about something. And I was like, by the time our kids, in college, that might not be something you can say. And I wish I could remember it right now. But I mean, it's just kind of wild because I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum here on the podcast and together. Like it's just you have to. I absolutely believe you have the right to say whatever the fuck you want, but like the repercussions, it's that's on you. Whatever that is, that's on you. Be that someone editing their island in their little space, you were talking about. I've got my island nice and cooled off and climate controlled to where I want it socially. Nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't mean that the thermostat doesn't need a tweak now and then. Like it just. It'll happen. Like people will surprise you and you'll be like, holy shit, I didn't know this person was like this. And it'll shock you sometimes. And sometimes it's people you really fucking love and you're really fucking close to. And you're like, dude, I can't have that. Like, especially now that I've got a kid, it's completely different. Like the amount of the things that I could normally just shrug off and just be like, whatever, I'm changing the subject with some people. If my kid's sitting there, I'm just like, you're not going to fucking download that shit onto her brain. Yeah. Like that. She doesn't need like, there will come a point where she will need to know that that's out there, but not when she's like 5 or 6, you know what I'm saying? Like, and she doesn't need to know that someone she's related to feels that way. So it's just, you start thinking about things different in that aspect. You're like, not only is it wrong, but it's, now you're potentially affecting a developing mind with something. So I don't know. It is weird because, like you said, we both grew up in the South, and I think that I know that in certain situations, I've got like really good friends that I still have from high school, and I don't lump them into this, but I know that I was definitely in situations that because I was one of the good ones, or because I listened to a certain type of music and stuff like that is the only reason why I was accepted in a circle every now and then, And it's like, well, this guy, yeah, he may be brown, but he loves this band and he's here at this concert. Like, any other situation, those guys might have kicked my ass for no reason other than I was brown.
Oh yeah, dog. If you were listening to La Raza and you know, having pinata birthday parties and stuff.
Yeah. I say this as I'm wearing a pinata shirt, a pinata button down shirt,
Now
but
it's fine.
yeah,
But yeah, it would have probably been maybe a different turnout. But that's again, I think that we've talked about this before, is that the thing that's crazy is that there is a natural biological defense mechanism in humans. Bias, to a degree, bias is a protective instinct, right? Meaning visually, people that look like you appear to be safer. Like that's a lizard brain thing.
they're part of the tribe. Yeah.
Like I think you've heard me say this before, right? If I walked into a party and I saw a group of black guys with a boombox playing rap music, in their with their jeans pulled down and whatever, and then there was a group of Asian guys listening to, K-pop, and with their motorcycle jackets, and then there was a group of, sort of more masculine looking women, that, whatever, and then there was a group of white dudes in khakis and polo shirts, and I don't know where to go. Right?
Yeah.
I probably migrate towards the khaki dudes because I'm just like, well, I don't know anything yet. That could actually be a fucking clan meeting. I don't know.
Right.
But all I can go on is what I see for right now.
Sure.
And my lizard brain says that's probably the safest place to go.
Yeah.
Right. Now you can find out real fast that that's not true.
Mhm.
But I do think that grouping with visually like groups is a somewhat biological thing. But then believing that there's now if you believe that that's superior, that's a problem. And
Right.
that happens a lot. That's not hardwired, right? But just recognizing sameness in some capacity, right? Or if I couldn't see anything and I heard different kinds of music playing, right? And I hear all this and there's a Nirvana, I'm like, oh, I'll probably go over there, right? Like, or a Foo Fighters, like somebody's playing the Foo Fighters. I may not see anything, but if I got to make a decision on the spot,
Yeah.
if I go there, I'm going to say, what seems like maybe that's a place can be safest for me, because at the very least I can go, oh, I like this too. Right. So, but we got to fight those instincts. And that's where it gets really sideways, is I just don't understand why. I mean, I do understand why historically, but now it's like you were talking about people now that still feel that way. It's just like, and what's no longer acceptable is like, I just have a hard time understanding why anybody anywhere thinks that they're better than anyone else. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I feel like we should be beyond, right?
Well,
It's
yeah.
just this idea that there's superiority in things that you can't control, like race or gender or, sexual orientation or whatever.
Or just the superiority in thinking that I don't want that person to do that thing, even though it doesn't affect me in any fucking way at all.
Right.
Like, I don't want that person to get married to that person because I don't believe it.
Well, the problem is though, is that they do think it affects them in some way. And but in a very meta way, in that they believe it's somehow going to erode the way they like the world being.
Right.
And that's a stupid thing to think about, because to your point, on your day-to-day life, it doesn't change anything. But somehow these people have convinced themselves that somehow they're important enough to where the state of the universe is something that they need to, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like, I don't want, my country to be like that. And I'm like, be like what? Like, it's like, I don't want my country to be like things you do, but I'm not trying to pass laws to say you can't fucking do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't kill. I'm not a hunter. I don't really particularly like the idea of killing animals. You know what I mean? But I'm not out here trying to fucking, pass laws saying you can't, you know what I mean? Like,
Can't hunt. Yeah.
go hunt deer if you want, and on your whatever. Like, I mean, I don't give a shit. I'm not a deer.
Right.
And I'm not going to be out in your fucking yard. So whatever, shoot away. Right? Like, I don't give a fuck. Just stay away from me. Just don't point that thing at me.
And history has just shown us that there's just a lot of people who are just all about fucking with other people that are doing things that they don't think is right, like that they don't agree with. I should say, and it's just it's mind numbing. Like, why do you care so much? Like, so, like, what? Why do you care like so fucking much when you could just go about your fucking day and not even have to think about it? It's so much. And I told Krista this the other day. I was like, because we were watching. She's always looking at Reddit, so she showed me something of just some ignorant dude being a shithead to a couple, like an interracial couple in Texas or some shit.
God.
And I'm just like, that seems like it takes so much fucking energy to be that mad and to go to that length to just fuck with people just because they're dating each other and they're not the same color, right? It seems like something that is just so fucking, it just requires so much time. Like being in IT and then my wife being in the industry she's in, you know, you constantly run into people who are just kind of like, oh, well, it's because you did something, or it's because, you know, you're working against me. We literally had a client tell us, you're working against me on this. And it's like, I didn't write the fucking program, lady. Like, I didn't write the fucking program. Apple did. Apple's working against you, not me. And you just want to grab them by their dumb face and be like, do you fucking understand that if it takes more energy for me to fuck with you than to just fix the problem so you go the fuck away and I can go back to reading my book, you know? I can go back to doing whatever the fuck I was doing that was making me much happier than talking to you. Like, and Krista runs into it with her job all the time. And she just wants to be like, ma'am, it's way more work for me to fabricate something that keeps you from getting the thing you need. Way more work. It's just mind-boggling. And I can't imagine being like that all the time, being that angry all the time. Like, it's just not, I don't have time for it. I bought a house. I've got a kid.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's like, there's so much psychology here you could peel back but
how dare they write that second album the way they wrote that second album?
I know because they're assholes.
Fucking assholes. All right. Before we get out of here, I know you're headed to Vegas, right?
Yeah. So how sad is this? You mentioned Bill Burr. So Bill Burr has a residency at the hotel we're staying at, and we miss him by one day.
What the fuck?
I know. It's so sad. Like I was so, because I looked and saw, I was like, we're staying at the Cosmopolitan, and I was like, Bill Burr's got a residency at the Cosmopolitan. He literally plays the night before we get there and the night after we leave.
Jesus.
We miss him on one day on either end.
He's so good live.
And it makes me so sad, like, that we're not going to see him. I was so fucking excited. But
oh, man, that is depressing. I'd be really bad. Like, I'm a big enough fan that I'd be like, how much is that change of ticket? Like, I'll fucking do it. I'll change the ticket now.
We seriously thought about staying over an extra day, but here's the problem, dude. We're going to Vegas for 4 days.
That's a lot of Vegas.
And that's one more day than you should be in Vegas already.
Arguably 2, depending on how well you're doing. Arguably 2.
So, like, I'm just like, God, I can't. When I went to Vegas for my bachelor party, we went out there for 5 days.
Fuck.
Bro, day 2, nighttime, we were going to bed, and I was just like, bro, we're not even at the halfway point.
God. I haven't been to Vegas in a while. I do like Vegas, but yeah, I think that 4 days is like, oof, you're pushing it there. But I mean, hopefully too, like, yeah, you're, you know, when's the last time you went to Vegas?
It's probably been 6-7 years.
You're a different person now, man. Like,
Well, I
I
mean,
think you're going to be able to make it fun.
Yeah, I mean, I can say this. I mean, so I'm going with my best friend who is kind of going through, or has gone through, like, a pretty big life adjustment.
Yeah.
Like, he got divorced a couple years ago. He had a very successful law firm that he just sold.
Mm-hmm.
And he went back to school to get his PhD. He wants to teach. I mean, his driver for his law firm was like, he's made tons of money, you know, and has done really well. He doesn't really need money anymore. Like, he's one of those people we've talked about, like, he's got enough money to where now he can not work, and he'd be fine.
Yeah.
And he kind of said, man, I'm killing myself doing this work and I don't really need it. Like, why am I stressed out like this?
Yeah.
Right. Which good for him. Like, again, most people fear, like, most people would not like getting to that point. Right. It's just like, but he's going to go, he's working. So he's finished up school for the summer. He's got one of his daughters going to college next year. His other one's a freshman, but they go to this summer away camp for like 2.5 weeks
Mhm.
and they're gone when we're going. So basically, he's like, I don't have a job. I'm in between semesters. My kids are gone, so I don't have any because he's got joint custody. He lives in the same town. You know, they spend half and half time, right, with his mom, with their mom.
Yeah.
And he's like, why don't we just go? So, like, what's cool is like, I'm not really like, you know, the clubs and all the crazy, like, we both like to gamble, and that's fine because, again, fortunately, like, we're both in a position where we can afford to lose a little money and we'll both just bring what we can lose and be okay with losing if we lose. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? If we don't lose, then great. If we do lose, then we're prepared to lose it. And it's not like we're putting ourselves in danger.
Right.
Um, and I think it's going to be interesting because I don't like what most people think about Vegas with the debauchery and all that stuff is not really on our agenda. Like, we're going to see a show called Opium, which are the same people that do Absinthe, which is the show that's been running at Caesars for years and years. Very irreverent, very adult. The stage is a rocket ship, but if you look at it from the top down, it looks like a huge dick.
Yeah,
And it's
nice.
all like drag queens and it's all just crazy. It's all
Yeah.
about sex and drugs and it's just nuts. And we're gonna go eat at some ridiculous restaurant, because we love food.
Yeah. I was about to
And
ask
then,
you what your go-to was. Like, what's your go-to? Like, I have to go here because I haven't been here in 6 years.
well, that's what's interesting for me about Vegas is I don't really do that. I go more the like, where haven't I been yet? And let's
Nice.
go, right. But because there are places that I love. Like the place, honestly, if I had to pick a spot, um, is the Lotus of Siam is this like Chinese restaurant there that has been there forever and it's legendary and it's
Mm.
authentic. It's unbelievable. And then um Smith and Walensky is a steakhouse that's there that's kind of been there for a long time
Mm.
that I really like. But there's so many great restaurants in Vegas now
Yeah.
that like we're gonna hit, so I think right now the two we're looking at is there's a place called Barry's Prime, which is a steakhouse that's in Old Vegas. So it's down on like Fremont, street down there. That I really want to go to. And then Jose Andres has a restaurant there called uh Meat Bazaar,
Okay.
which is just like he's Spanish, obviously, and
Sure.
there's, just whatever. Although that one's pricey, like real pricey. It's like, I think it's a Michelin starred restaurant, actually.
Damn.
So we're looking at that. I mean, but I know we'll probably go to Barry's. But there's just so many. But like, there's a cigar bar in Caesars that we really like, and so like we'll go in there and smoke cigars and have some bourbon. We'll probably bet on some sports. Um,
Yeah. I mean, so like to me, something I found out pretty quick, like the first time I went to Vegas, to really get into like the debauchery of Vegas, you've got to just be willing to just drop tons of cash and go to these crazy clubs and places. And I'm just kind of like, I just kind of want to chill with my friends and go play some cheap tables somewhere. Like just go to Old Vegas and go to the Golden Gate and just play some blackjack, walk around, see things. Like it, I just
yeah,
I had no I've had friends that had the urge to go stand in line to get into a club, and I'm
no,
just like, I
never
just
happened.
can't, dude. And then you get in there and it's not going to be what you think it is. Like you just end up standing there ordering 2 or 3 really fucking expensive drinks and no one fucking talks to you. All right? Because all you can afford is those 2 or 3 expensive drinks. Like you got to do some work to really get into the debauchery of Vegas, I feel like.
Although I will say though, the last time me and my buddy went together, we were kind of in that phase in our life, and we went to Pure, which at the time I think was the club in the Bellagio,
Yeah.
and it was one of those weird like it was just there's always but there was a lot of people in town like fucking Ashley Simpson was there with the dude from whoever, which was she? It was not the Good Charlotte guy, but
It wasn't fucking
or was it
Fallout Boy guy.
no, or was it like DJ AM or something was there with like Paris Hilton? Like it, it was one of those kind of things. But the greatest part about it is like um we were walking in to the club and we had just gotten in, right? And so we had gone over not super early, but a little bit early. And there were people in there partying and I saw a guy sort of off balance a little and he sort of stopped and he was telling a story and he was trying to talk to some girls or something. He was waving his arms all around and there was a little person, like
Mm-hmm.
a dwarf, right? A little
Yeah.
person. And he swung his arm around and hit this person. And I go, "Hey, what the fuck?" And the guy turned around and I'm like, he goes, "What?" And I'm like, "What are you, dude, watch what you're doing. Like you just clocked this guy in the face. Like fucking calm down."
Yeah.
Right. It's like 8 o'clock. Like you're going to be dead if you keep this up. Right. Like it's so early. And anyway, I wasn't even paying. And the guy, the little person goes, "Hey, thanks, dude. It was fucking Wee Man
Oh,
from
from
Jackass."
Jackass. Yeah.
And he's like, "Come on."
Oh,
Because
Jesus.
I didn't know who he was. And we ended up hanging without that dude the entire, he had a table like in the, and like, that's like whatever it is, $1,500 minimum, like if you get a table in that place, like you have to buy like table service or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he just ends up dragging us around and it was a bunch of like his Jackass buddies. And we just ended up hanging out with those dudes all fucking night.
Wow. Just the shit you can fall into is incredible when you're out there, I'm sure.
And like we ended up not spending any money, you know what I mean? But it was just like that was the thing. Like I told David, I was just like, I don't think I want to go to any clubs. I'm like, but the funny thing is like you just kind of never know what might happen, like something like that.
Mhm.
Especially although now it's like I told him, I'm like, the danger now though is we're gonna be the old guy in the club. Remember when we did that and we saw the dudes in the club and we're like, why aren't those guys here?
Yeah, who the
Like,
fuck are these guys?
that's us now. I'm like, you realize, of course, that's us, right? Like the 22-year-olds will be like, oh my God, these guys are almost dead.
Yeah, I'm like perfect age right now for breweries. But I'm not perfect age for like the college bars in my town. Like I'm just not. It's weird. And I was like, and I'm fully aware of that. And my temples remind me every day that I'm fully aware of that. But like, yeah, it's
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying like it's there. It's time to let the young be the young. Let them have it, and you go and do your own thing and just sit at the table.
But that's the thing. Like, I mean, I used to say, or I think I said it the other day and my buddy corrected me, but like, we'll be sitting at a $5 table, although they don't have $5 tables anymore. They're $10 is now, I think, the minimum table everywhere. But,
Oh, wow. Even in Old Vegas.
Yes.
Okay.
There may be some fiver somewhere still in Old Vegas, but I don't think so. But also it's like we like to do stuff that like, and we'll probably throw dice. Like I don't know if there's any craps players, but like craps is one of those games where I mean, if you just want to throw dice and have fun and you can stand there forever. You know what I mean? Like because of the nature of the betting, if you're not betting crazy, because you'll hit some, you'll lose some, and it's just a slow burn.
Right.
And and you're just you're getting drinks and you're meeting people standing around the pit, you know what I mean, like around the table, and like we like to do that a lot. But you can go, I can take $200 and stand at a dice table for 3 or 4 hours,
Yeah.
assuming you just don't go on a really terrible,
Yeah.
like somebody just goes ice cold. Like that's a game where you're gonna win, you're gonna win 5 out of you're gonna lose 60% of the time, right? So
Sure.
it just keeps balancing itself out, you know what I mean, over time. And you can just sit there and just kind of chill. But and I'm sure there'll be like during the day, there'll be a whole lot of like mojitos at the pool. You know what I mean? Like that
for
kind
sure.
of thing. Right.
Yeah, it's you can kind of I do the same thing with blackjack in Old Vegas. You just sit around and bullshit with your friends and play. You can play blackjack and go up and go down and go up and get down, and you can just maybe walk away from the table. Maybe even like some nights you're up, right? But you can kill like 3 or 4 hours easy and not even realize it.
And in Vegas is nice because that's your booze money. Because as long as you're gambling, they'll bring you drinks,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So it's like if you didn't gamble, I'd spend it, to your point, because booze is so expensive.
Mm.
At least then you're getting your drinks. Although it's gonna be July in Vegas, so my buddy was like
Oh
going to the
God.
pool, and I'm like, yeah, I mean we can do that, but I don't know how much threshold's gonna be there because it's gonna be about 75,000 degrees outside.
Mm.
So either I'm just gonna be in the pool the whole entire time, or you know, because it's gonna be real hot.
Last time we were there, it was I think we had one day where it was 118, and it was the weekend that they legalized recreational marijuana. So, and it was International Fight Week, so like they were having a huge UFC, and the place was just buzzing. But yeah, it was. I mean, it was still fun, but man, it was so hot. Like you had to kind of like when you went to go somewhere, you just kind of had to jog to the next place so you could get the fuck out of the sun as quick as possible. But even at night, it felt like a brick, like a pizza oven, pizza oven. Like you're just walking around, you're like, it's still fucking hot. It's midnight, just radiating in your face.
Well, and one of the big things is normally when David and I have gone in the past, we've stayed off strip just because it's cheaper.
Sure, yeah.
We just Uber in. But he had some comp nights at Cosmo, which is right down there on the strip. So the other thing that's nice is like we like most of the bars in the Cosmopolitan, and I don't know if that's a fairly new one. I don't know if you've been there.
I may have walked through it. I don't think I've been in there.
It's modern. It's only been around. I mean, it's 10 years old, 50. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty new, and we're also lucky that we don't have to necessarily do a lot of traveling around if we don't want to. Like we can just kind of hang there. And if we do like Caesars, Bellagio, like everything is right. Like we can just go across the street, you know what I mean? If we want to go to another spot. So, it's going to be interesting to see with the heat and that whole thing. But I also just remembered the other day about the whole weed bit. So that's the other thing is like, there's going to be probably a reasonable amount of edible consumption
as you should. I mean, we went to the dispensary that weekend to be like, hell yeah, we can buy weed legally, and and all that stuff. And we come out and there's a news team standing outside and they're asking people to interview. Like this is like the very first day it's legal, and they're like, oh, would you like to come on camera and talk to us about? I was like, no. You know where I'm from? No, I can't do that.
No speak English.
No.
Get away from me.
Yeah. Medicine. Just walk away. Medicine. Oh man. Well, I hope you have fun in Vegas, and I appreciate you. Going on the maiden voyage on the offline show. Offline with Lopez Radio is going to be available on YouTube, on the YouTube channel for Lopez Radio. So be sure to check that out. I'll have a link for that in the description of the podcast, or you can just look up Lopez Radio on YouTube, at Lopez Radio for all social media. If you want to follow Shawn, it's at Shawn ATL on Twitter and at Shawn Arnold on Instagram. You can also check out his I almost called it your iPod, which is now defunct.
Check out my iPod.
I'll check out my iPod, bro. Holds 500 gigs. TMIPod.com. Check out his podcast. It's wonderful stuff. Are you planning on firing up some more of those soon?
Yeah, I've actually been trying. I've had on a bit of hiatus because I started my business.
Sure.
It's weird. It's going to be 2 years in September, but we've just been so busy. But I just actually sent out some emails this week about getting some stuff queued up. So that's going to be ramping back up here shortly.
Yeah, I've got some big stuff coming down the pipes too. Once I put this out, I've got 2 scheduled this weekend with a streamer friend of mine, Ashley. She's also known as Kitty Cosmos. And then Nick Schultz, Slick Schultz, one of the longtime guests of the show. Hasn't been on in a long time, but we're going to actually meet up and we're going to record a podcast and an episode of Offline in a brewery. I actually already reached out to the brewery and got permission, so we should be good to go. But that'll be happening this weekend. So next couple of weeks, we should have some pretty steady content flowing out of Lopez Radio. So leaning hard back into the podcast side of things and the YouTube side of things. But Shawn, thanks for being here tonight, man. I really appreciate it. It's we always manage to kill about 4 hours in no time. It's just like,
that's why we're friends. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. But guys, thanks for being here. We will see you next time around. Be on the lookout at Lopez Radio on all the social medias and on YouTube. See ya.